Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is the February 28th meeting of the Willits City Council. And we will start with the pledge to the flag. And Jerry, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, would you do roll call, Kathy?
Yes. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Stransky.
Yes.
Orenstein.
Here.
Rodriguez. Here. Mayor Strong.
Here. All right. So we start the meeting with public communications, and these are for items that are not on the agenda. So the council welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone may be given an opportunity to be heard. To expedite matters and avoid repetition, when there is a large group of people, we ask that you select a spokesperson. This is limited to matters that under the jurisdiction of the city, which are not on the posted agenda, and public criticism of the city council, the commissions, boards, and agencies are not to be prohibited. In other words, they are allowed. You can criticize us. No action is taken on items that are not on the agenda. So if anyone here is here to speak on a matter that is not on the posted agenda, this is your opportunity. So when you come up, if you do now, or whenever you also come up for a posted item, we ask that you could sign in. It helps us.
There's no sign-in sheet.
There was no sign in. Okay, well then state your name. It is not required by law that you state your name. It's just a convenience for our note taker. So if there's no public comment on the non-posted agenda, we will move directly to our posted item, number 3A, discussion and possible action regarding mobile home issues, mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. So what we usually do is we start with the staff presentation, and then council members can ask for a few just clarifications if they want to ask the staff something kind of technical. Otherwise, we want to hear from the public after that. We open the public hearing. Then we bring it up to the council members to, discuss the matter. And I usually will offer one more little opportunity for public folks to respond if something the council said feels like you want to clarify that or you want to comment on it, but those will be much briefer. So we'll start with our staff recommendations. So Bob Peralt, our interim city manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Before I begin the report, I just want to let everyone know that a week ago, through the agency of Vice Mayor Rodriguez, there was a meeting between some members of the tenants group and the mobile home park management. That meeting went very well. There was good communication. I think it established a good platform for continued communication, and there was a very good and healthy exchange of information. I just want to let everyone know that took place. I'm going to provide you with the staff report. I've done a overhead, so hopefully everyone will get the major points that I'm trying to make. And there are also copies of this PowerPoint over on the table next to the door if you'd like to take one with you. With that, I'll get started. This is obviously the mobile home park in question. It's located to the south of town. It has 113 spaces. At the present time, the name has officially been changed to the Willits Mobile Home Park. And talking about the issue, in December, a large number of residents came to the council meeting. They were tenants actually from both the Willits Mobile Home Park or Wagon Wheel Mobile Home Park, as well as Valley Oaks out in the valley. There were a large number of concerns that were brought up at that time. Among those was a recent increase in the space rent. For some individuals, that totaled $110. Based on that rent increase, there was a general concern amongst those in attendance that there would be future adjustments that might equal that amount. And with that, there was a concern expressed by the tenants that with rent going up at that kind of an increase, we could lose some of our affordable housing. The housing might become less affordable for those tenants. There was also a concern that was expressed regarding the new owner's treatment of tenants, and by and large, those in attendance requested that the council take action. I would indicate that those individuals came during the public comment portion of the meeting, so there was no item for the council to take action on at that particular time, other than to provide staff with direction, and that's essentially what they did. The council provided staff with direction to return with a report, and that report was to develop the facts and options that are available for the council. I would say that in giving that direction, the council also advised those residents that were here from Valley Oaks that Valley Oaks is actually out in the county and is part of the county's jurisdiction, and therefore is not subject to anything that the council can or will do. And the same remains with what we're going to be discussing tonight. What the staff did do in preparing for this report is we reviewed state law, spoke with a tenant's representative, spoke at length with both the tenant's representative and the property manager, and we also reviewed rent stabilization ordinances from other communities. To begin with, I'd like to talk a little bit about the mobile home residency law. It's also referred as MRL. The mobile home residency law controls a lot about tenant property owner relationships. Key elements of the law that really come to bear on the subject that we're talking about. The MRL itself, the mobile home rental law, residency law, does not regulate amount of rent or rent increases by park owners. What it does is outline a procedure as to how those adjustments are to be secured. MRL, as I've mentioned, does provide noticing requirements. It requires that space rent will be noticed with a 90-day notice, and if fees are to be increased, if new fees are to be passed through to the tenants, that's to be done on a 60-day notice. Rent stabilization is a local concern. It is something that here within the city of Willits, the city of Willits has control over. So the state provides the city with the ability to legislate rent control. Also, in terms of the MRL law, park owners can offer long-term leases of more than 12 months. In this case, they've offered a long-term lease with several options, and we'll get into that a bit later. Park owners can offer short-term leases of 12 months or less. And usually park tenants are offered a long-term lease. They're offered an opportunity to review that lease over a 30-day period, and at the end of the lease, the tenant has the ability to opt not to take the long-term lease, may opt for the shorter-term lease, and move forward with that. Park rules, as they are incorporated in both long and short-term leases. A little bit about the park itself. This park was first constructed in 1978, so it would be considered an older park. It was purchased by the current owners in April of 2017. Vida Communities provides the park management on behalf of the owners. As I've already indicated, the park consists of 113 spaces. According to a recent survey that was completed by the tenants, a number of those tenants are of a lower income, and a number of those are seniors. As well as the setting, there are 3 other parks within Willits. There's the Grange Mobile Home Park, which has 13 units. The Clark Trailer Park over on San Francisco has 16 units. And there is a very small park at 630 South Main with 4 units. It's my understanding that those units on South Main, the 4 units, have long-term leases, so they would not be subject to rent stabilization. I should indicate that that's also part of the MRL law, is that if there are spaces that have long-term rents, they're actually exempt from any kind of rent control or rent stabilization. Recent rent adjustments, let's talk about those for a second. Prior to park purchase, the rent was $485.85 per month. In July, tenants received a notice of a $60 increase. That increase was made in compliance with MRL requirement for a 90-day notice. The increase really amounts to a 12% increase in the base rent. At the time that the owner noticed the tenants regarding this increase, the owner or property manager indicated that at least $34 of the $60 was due to a reassessment of the park taxes based on the recent sale. That happens quite frequently when properties change ownership. There was no other indication of the notice as to what the rent adjustment was to cover. An issue complicating the rent adjustment is that prior to park purchase, a number of tenants received or were offered a $50 discount. This was often referred to as a front yard discount. Front yard discounts were given tenants who paid their rent on time, followed park rules, and maintained the space's exterior appearance. In November, it is our understanding that most of these discounts were eliminated, and I'm not aware of any noticing that was done by the property management as to why those discounts were eliminated. In talking with the property manager, he indicated that a number of the tenants were not complying with the original intent for the discount. But as a result, in November, when those discounts were eliminated, that increased the rent for several tenants by the $110 that was previously referenced. I'm sure was one of the reasons that a number of tenants expressed concern. It is important to note that the property manager does offer a rental assistance program to tenants. This is offered to tenants who qualify financially Essentially, they use the Section 8 requirements for qualification. Once you're approved for this rental assistance program, qualified residents receive 10% discount on their rents. And those that may have been approved previously, these discounts remain available even through the additional rate adjustments. I guess there is a recertification process. Those applications, there are copies of the applications provided in the council packets, and I'm sure they're available through the property manager. To talk a bit about property management offered leases, as I've already noted, the property manager offers both long-term and short-term leases. 68, it's my understanding that 68 of the 113 tenants have signed a long-term lease. And again, as I mentioned earlier, those spaces would not be under any kind of legislated rent control. They're exempt from it. Those long-term leases had 3 options. One was a 15-year option. The second was a 20-year option, and the last one was a 25-year option. Each of those leases, the adjustments varied a little bit. The adjustments noted in the lease were to be based on a CPI for the 15-year option, but not less than 5%. The 20-year option adjustments were to be based on the CPI, but not less than 4.5%. And the 25-year option adjustment was to be based on the CPI, but not less than 4%. I'd like to point out that this phraseology is actually a floor in terms of the adjustment. It is not a ceiling per se.
What's CPI?
CPI right now depends on which one you're using, but as
Consumer Price Index.
Consumer Price Index. Sorry for that. That's used frequently for adjusting several different types of payments. Next, it's interesting to note that for all 3 of these options, though, the rent will be adjusted the same for all of them for a period of 3 years. This year, the rent has been adjusted to $545.85. Next year, it is to go to $580.85, which is a $35 increase. And in 2020, that increase would be to $605.85, which is a $25 increase. In addition to base adjustments, I think it's important to point out that rents can also be adjusted by a share of operational costs. These can include insurance. They can include property tax, as was recently done if there was an increase in the property tax outside of the 2% that is referred to as a Proposition 13 adjustment. They could end up being adjusted by that as well. They can also be adjusted for capital improvements. In other words, if there was a major capital improvement project that the property manager wanted to take on, those costs could also be passed through on a proportional basis. I will say that in my discussions with property management, they did not indicate that they had any capital improvement projects under consideration at the present time. I will say that there is going on, and now let's take a look at rent stabilization ordinances. There are a number of cities that have rent stabilization ordinances throughout California. There are roughly 485 cities within the state of California, and approximately 100 of those cities have some form of rent stabilization ordinances for mobile homes. Rent stabilization can obviously do some positive things. It can preserve and protect affordable housing. It can provide rent adjustment predictability, and it can offer park owners a method to obtain actually a fair rate of return. For local jurisdictions, there is a downside to it. There are costs associated with bringing on a rent control ordinance. The city would have to administer that ordinance, which would require some effort on an annual basis. The law also provides that the city would have an option or an opportunity to try or to recapture those costs through both the park owners and as well as the tenants. Ukiah has a very good ordinance in my mind, if you've had a chance to take a look at it. Its base rent is adjusted by the Consumer Price Index with a 5% cap. In other words, if the Consumer Price Index indicates that inflation is occurring at a rate of, let's say, 6 or 7% under that ordinance, they can't charge, the property management can't charge more than 5%. But there is also an element in there that if for 2 years the CPI were to exceed 5%, the city could consider raising that cap through an amendment to the ordinance. The Ukiah ordinance has a pass-through for government costs, much like the lease does, including utilities and tax increases. Capital costs under the Ukiah lease can also be passed through to the tenants, but the difference is that there is at least a consultation process with the Ukiah ordinance that they need to at least go out and meet with the property owners before capital costs are passed through.
The tenants.
With
the tenants.
Tenants, yeah, excuse me, with the tenants. So there is a consultation process within that Ukiah ordinance. There is also another element to the Ukiah ordinance. The property manager can seek to get a fair rate of return. That's if those costs are over and above the CPI amount that is approved for that year. They can seek to gain a fair rate of return. That formula is somewhat complex and involves the representation of what the owner's costs are versus existing revenue. That gets submitted to the city. The ordinance also provides a resolution of the fair rate of return by arbitration. And as I've already mentioned, there is a provision for cost recovery through administrative fees. To kind of summarize, I know it's a lot of information, but it's a topic that deserves this kind of discussion. Again, to recap that summary, spring of 2017, the ownership of the mobile home park changed. Base rents were increased by 12%, and to many, the $50 discounts were also taken away. And so for some, the adjustment amounted to $110. Number of tenants, as I mentioned, did appear before the City Council. That's why we have this item before you tonight. The property owners property owner and manager has offered long and short-term rents. Long-term rents have been signed again by 68 of the 113 space holders. So that means that in this case, should the council want to move forward with rent stabilization, it would apply to the 45 remaining spaces that have not signed long-term leases. There is space holders with long-term leases, as I've mentioned, are exempt from rent stabilization. Once you've signed that lease, I don't know that you have any real recourse. There's a 60-day notice, a 60-day...
30-day notice to review.
Right, but there's also a termination clause. But I think that termination clause exists if you are going to, terminate your occupancy of the space, and how that comes about. There are different alternatives for the council to consider. Council could choose to take no action. There's no requirement for the council to take any action. No law requires that you do it. It is simply at your discretion. The council could choose to form an ad hoc committee to facilitate and develop a form of a lease that would work for both parties, and again, those would have to be those parties that would fall under the control of the that would have still not signed long-term leases. Council could direct staff to develop an ordinance similar to Ukiah. The reason that actually staff is recommending the ad hoc committee to work with tenants and park management to develop an acceptable, a lease acceptable to both parties. And the reason for that is simply because from staff's perspective, though the council could opt to develop the ordinance and go through that regulation, there are costs associated with that, and that would take potentially a longer process to get to the end of. In terms of the ad hoc committee, a couple of things there. The city, if the council wishes to move forward with that, I wouldn't think that the council would want to advocate on either the property management's behalf or the tenants. Your job would simply be to try, in my mind, to facilitate and act as a convener and assist them in reaching an objective that would be mutually agreeable. And again, as staff says, this is our current recommendation. Of course, if that should fail for any reason, you still would then have the opportunity to proceed with the rent stabilization ordinance. Like I said, it's a lot of material and information. I'm certainly available, as is the city attorney, to answer any questions for clarification you may have regarding the information that we've presented.
So for now, just questions from the council that are like to clarify something rather than voice opinions at this point. So does any council member want to clarify anything from Bob's report to us? No?
I thought it was very accurate and thorough.
Okay, great.
I do have one point. The CPI.
Yes.
We had talked about that, and according to the lease that I read, the CPI is based on the Los Angeles area as opposed to the San Francisco area. And typically, whenever we do contracts here, it's always San Francisco. In addition to that, some of the other ordinances that you supplied in the packet will take the San Francisco CPI, which I assume is a little bit less than LA, but it may not be. I don't know for sure. But it's closer to us than LA is. But it doesn't have to be 100% of the CPI. It could be somewhat less. And in fact, many of the other jurisdictions did peg the CPI at maybe 70%, or the increase at 70 or 80 or 85% of the CPI, to reflect the fact that Mendocino County is still a lower cost of living area than the Bay Area. So I think we need to keep those things in mind.
If I could, Madam Mayor, in terms of responding to that, CPI's, again, Consumer Price Index is based on statistical areas. You can use different kinds of indexes, but if you use the CPI, there are 4 statistical areas within the state of California, and they are all very broad. There's the CPI that you referenced in the LA area. There's one in San Diego. There's the San Francisco Greater Bay Area, and I think there is one for the Sacramento area. I did indicate to the property manager at the time that the use of the CPI from Southern California did not, it seems to me that it was boilerplate, that it just been brought forward from another agreement that they were using.
Yeah, I have one clarification on the potential adjustments over and above, this is on the long-term leases.
Yeah.
Over and above taxes and base rate, included operational expenses, and it seemed to me that the language was pretty broad, that it would include fairly normal, what I would consider normal responsibilities.
Right.
Is that your impression?
Yeah, insurance is a good example of that. They could pass along, a liability insurance cost if, and they could do that proportionately to each of the tenants. That's an operational cost. So far, I haven't seen that in this case, but it is a possibility.
Okay. So, in opening up the public hearing, which I'm going to do now, I think it might make sense to hear from the owner and operator or manager first, and then hear from tenants. And that doesn't preclude people coming back with some other comments, but I think it makes sense to hear from the operators first.
Absolutely, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor, staff. Thank you again for the opportunity to come and speak with you. I appreciate, again, all of the time and effort that Vice Mayor Rodriguez and Interim City Manager Bob Farrell put into this. They did a great job, in my opinion. I appreciate being brought into the conversation and being allowed to share some information. So let me start with who I am. My name is Abe Aragati. I am owner and operator of Bovita Communities. We own and operate Willits Mobile Home Park and Valley Oaks Mobile Home Park. I know early on there was some discussion that we had bought Easy Living. We did not buy Easy Living Mobile Home Park and the outskirts of Willits. It's just those 2 properties. Our goal in buying properties, let me back up and say that our goal is long-term. We don't buy properties to come in to a community, paint them, make them pretty, raise the rents, and turn around and sell them. We're long-term investors in real estate. Our goal is to provide safe, clean, decent housing for people in any city and community we operate in. We want to be vested into that community. And that's our goal in Willits and has been from day one. When we first came and saw Willits and Valley Oaks Mobile Home Park about a year ago, we saw a lot of opportunity here. We saw a lot of opportunity where we saw mismanagement. We saw the opportunity to clean the parks up. And that's basically what we've been doing from day one. And a couple of things in the staff report that I would like to carefully disagree with. Number one, the yard discount program did not go away. And it didn't stop in November. We started enforcing it and holding people to the standard of it, as you saw in the report, those requirements, as of June, not November. And so, we've gone through the parks on a regular basis, and what we've done is we've identified space by space, what the issues are. And if I can back up, many of you kind of heard and through the paper and through some of you directly from some of the tenants over the summer in July, as I recall, about concerns about notices that we had sent out, specifically identifying some of those issues and concerns. And again, there's also concern that we had changed some of the rules, which is absolutely incorrect. We inherited the rules from the previous owner, and we have followed those rules. We haven't made any changes to them. So all we're doing is trying to elevate that standard that was supposed to be in place by the previous owner, but hasn't been enforced. That's all that we're doing. As the report said, about $34, $35 of that $60 rent increase was out of our pocket right to Mendocino County for the increase in property taxes. I think that, again, the long-term leases, as the report says, have shared really the success of that program that we put in place. It provides the tenants and the homeowners with stabilization. It tells them what their rent's going to be. Now, to your question, Madam Mayor, to the council earlier, in terms of rent increases, what additional can be passed through? There are several of those items in there. But the reality is, as an example, we spent $25,000, a little over that, in the first few months of operation of one of our properties, not Valley Oaks, the other one. That won't be passed through to the tenants. That was a capital improvement in one of the utilities, but that won't be passed through. We saved those for really exceptional issues, and I described some of those to a few folks. We had an issue in one case where we had a major landslide that was just a giant mess, and that was an operational issue above and beyond normal, and that was one where we took it and amortized it over the course of the useful life, 30 years. It ended up being like an $8 additional increase. We're very careful and conscious about those things, and we try to make it so that it just follows what the base lease says. So it would be, in the case of a 25-year, 4% increase going forward. So wanted to make that clear. Let me see. Also, in the staff report, you talked about the downside risk of rent stabilization ordinances. There is a downside risk. I know that Doug Johnson with the WMA sent the council an email. The city of Carson is facing an $8 million, they're not facing, they have an $8 million judgment against them because of their rent stabilization ordinance. Now, please don't take that as anything from me. We're not interested in suing you. We love the city of Willits. We don't like attorneys. They're people that cost way too much money. We prefer to leave them out of it. But that is, something that's out there. Again, we met with the group last week. We want to meet with them going forward. We want to meet with them on an annual basis at the minimum, because we want them to know what our plans are going forward, continuing forward, and as I said, we're here for the long term. So I'd be happy to answer questions anybody has.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I also want to keep that somewhat limited until we heard from everybody.
We read the letters, of course,
Yes.
some of the complaints, against your management, and these warning letters that you referred to.
Sir.
And what I saw in them was like a one-line thing. The lawn was long, there's trash or whatever. The first thing that popped into my mind, being a suspicious kind of guy, is how arbitrary are these assessments? Whoever makes the assessment of the property, they come along, they look at the thing, and they jot down some notes. Are there certain standards that you use, or maybe you can elaborate on that?
Absolutely, thank you. They're not arbitrary. They're written. It's a 4-page document that clearly states, rules and regulations for the property. Beyond that, I know I shared with staff that we also have, the MRL, the Mobile Home Residency Law. We have Title 25, which oversees, basically the buildings, everything in the community, and then of course local health and safety codes. So while it may not be written in the rule that you can't have, let's be specific, a non-fire retardant car cover, because we saw several of those today. That's a health and safety code. You can't have, if it's non-fire retardant, you can't have it next to a home, next to a structure. Therefore, that would be something that we specifically say, hey, you have an unapproved, cover next to a house that's a fire hazard. Please remove it. And so let me go back to more specific to the rules. We try to be as broad as we can without being too nitpicky. It's really interesting. We were driving through earlier today, kind of making notes on everything, because again, we're going through the process. And again, we could literally write down, in some cases, 50 different items. But rather than do that, we try to go for the bigger stuff Like you have, items stored on your porch. And again, the rules specifically say the only thing that can be stored on outside are barbecue and approved outdoor patio furniture and bicycles, by the way. That's it. So anything outside of that is a rule violation, if you will. So we try to be as specific as we can without being overbearing and being nitpicky on everything, single thing. So we're looking for just a general clean space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Sir.
Brief questions, Mr. Abrigati. Are you open to continued dialogue?
Absolutely.
And in any of your properties that you currently own throughout the state, is rent stabilization a fact there? In any of those properties?
We did. We purchased a property in Southern California, 2 properties in Southern California that have rent stabilization. In both cases, about half of the spaces were on long-term leases.
Okay.
Yeah,
But when you bought them, rent stabilization was already happening there?
absolutely.
Has that been an issue?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, so, now, are there any other representatives from the management side?
Sure.
If there is anybody else? Are you on the management side of the? I'm asking for the managers or owners first, and then we'll open it up. Yes, you'll have your.
We're done, excuse me.
Almost.
Mayor Strong and council, thanks for having me. My name is Ben Smith. I'm the regional property manager, and the Willits Mobile Home Park as well as Valley Oaks are in the portfolio of parks that I will be managing on an ongoing forward basis. We're here just to be conciliatory, let you know what our mission statement is, let you know what we intend for the properties. And so I wanted to introduce you to Boa Vida Communities. We do have these brochures available that do talk about how we manage our parks and what our mission statement is. But I wanted, and so if you'd like one, I'd be happy to give each of you a copy. Who we are basically is a property management owner who invests in communities like the one in Willits here. We invest in the community. We're spending dollars in the community to make it a nicer place. Our mission statement is actually build safe, clean, and friendly communities for all. So that's what we do. And we strive, whenever possible, to have happy communities, happy tenants, and we try to be the best management owners that we can be. So that's basically the posture of our company. Like Abe said, we do not come in, we do not clean the place up and sell it for a profit and then get out of the community. We intend to be here. We don't intend to sell ever. So whether that's 20 years, 30 years, or longer, that's what we intend at this point for the city and the county here. When we buy, just like any business owner, if any of you are business owners, we buy based on a set of known standardized rules for doing business, and we feel like we have that. We have only owned this park for just a few short months, and we have a set of rules that we're working through. We have not yet gotten a complete handle on it. But like Abe said, we look for opportunity in the parks that we buy. And we found a lot of opportunity to clean up some mismanagement, potentially, some incorrect books we're still working through and trying to negotiate with tenants who have prior agreements that we inherited, loan amounts and things like that, where they may not have been treated fairly, and we're trying to negotiate through that. So there is a lot to consider when we take over a community, and sometimes we don't get the communication right or we don't get the timing right. We're a growing company, so what we do is we come in and evaluate and we start tackling problems. The bigger the problems first. It was talked about CPI. CPI is not a great tool. It is a standard tool, and we're willing to subject ourselves to CPI. But CPI is Consumer Price Index, milk, bread, et cetera, et cetera. It's not real estate. It usually does not keep up with what real estate would grow if real estate were the measure. We understand that, but we will subject ourselves to it. So we do use CPI in our long-term leases. We do restrict ourselves to CPI, even though real estate usually grows at a higher rate. Whether it's Los Angeles or San Francisco, I really think San Francisco is actually a higher cost of living area, to be honest. But there's only 4 major areas that we can go by. But even if you take the highest cost of living area, it often doesn't keep up with real estate. But in our long-term leases that are offered up to 25 years, that does not lock in a tenant for 25 years. It's not a ball and chain type situation. What it does is it gives them predictability out to 25 years. And the reason why we set it so long is because we could have, if we did a 1-year lease or a 5-year lease, we could have 40% of our tenants at any one time with expired leases. And it's tough to manage re-signing of leases. So that's what the idea is behind it. And as Bob pointed out, it takes care of itself. It's generally the same type of rate that any kind of a rent control or rent stabilization would give anyhow. But it is us subjecting ourselves to tenant stability, again, going back to being happy communities and maintaining those. Rent stabilization is also, in some ways, a disincentive to do what our mission statement is. We invest, as Amy said, when we come in and we have a wastewater treatment area to clean up or some other thing. We're looking into right now adding dog parks to the park. We're adding speed bumps because we've heard that there's a speeding problem within the parks. We have things to clean up for safety reasons. Those all cost money, and we generally do not pass those costs on to our tenants. We take on those costs. With rent control, that creates a disincentive for us to invest in the community. If the city and the county are going to take that role on, oftentimes landowners will just allow the government to do it. We'll sit back, collect rents, but not really invest. And so we want an opportunity to invest in the community, and that's what our goal is, and that's what our track record shows in all of our other communities.
I think in the interest of fairness, don't want to have everyone be on the 3-minute limit, and giving a little bit more minutes, but not too many, because I think it's important for us to hear your points.
So no questions?
Yeah, if there's questions, that doesn't count in the minutes, okay?
Question.
Go ahead.
The question I had was, and you kind of referred to it, about park improvements. You mentioned the dog park and the speed bumps, for example. Do you have any other long-term plans for, beautifying the park, upscaling it a little bit? And you did allude to the fact that you weren't going to pass on the costs of at least, the 2 examples that you used to the tenants. Would that be the case with whatever you might be planning in the future?
Well, Boa Vida is a relatively new company, but we're not new to the business. It's one of other companies that we have. Abe could speak a little bit more to that point because he's been in the business for so long, but I think he has actually passed on costs less than 5 times, 3 or 4 times in 20 years. So that is a very uncommon occurrence. What we want to do is improve the park. We just talked to a neighbor today about tree roots that were breaking up her concrete. So we talked about a plan to jackhammer out the concrete and use gravel, which is more givable, to meet her particular solution. I mean, that's just one tenant. So we're not going to pass that on to her. We're just going to take care of it, consistent with our goals and our values for the park. So beautifying the park, yes, we actually have plans for a tot lot, a dog park, a fenced area where you can get doggy bags and things like that. We're looking for areas to create community and places of friendship. We have, in some places, kids in the street, and that is in the same park where we've heard of tenants speeding through. So we're creating speed bumped areas. We're going to put in pots at the end of the speed bumps so people don't go around the landscaping out to avoid the speed bumps where kids are playing. We're trying to create what some people call tot lots or playgrounds where they would have a swing set and things like that and would get them out of the roadways, for example, places to play soccer, things like that. Those are all beautifying areas, and those are plans that we do have. Now, we can't tackle all these at once because it costs a lot of money to grade and put up fencing and so forth. But yes, those are all areas that we want to improve the community, again, for the long term, and not pass through the costs whenever possible.
So what would your criteria be for whether or not you pass on the certain costs?
Well,
in this category?
Yeah, we were just talking about developing some standards for that. Like we said, 3 times in 20 years, generally we just don't do it. But if it's unexpected, if it would be a budget blower, so it costs so much, we have to put all the money up front, we don't have any guarantees in the future, we would probably take an expense like that, like Abe said, amortize it over 20 years as an example, $8 for that particular project. It has to be something that blows the budget. It has to be something that's generally unexpected. It's not something that we plan for.
And how would tenants fit into your plans to do these things? As far as, would they have a vote? Would they have the opportunity to say, well, the majority votes that we don't really want this to happen because it's going to increase our rent by X number of dollars, that kind of thing. And would you be responsive to that?
We would be responsive to community input. Generally, what is at the heart of anything that we want to do is the community itself. We want to improve the place for the tenants that are there. We have to partner with them. So in other words, if we're wanting to bring in homes, as an example, clean the place up, we need help from the existing tenants. We don't expect them to buy new homes. We don't expect them to do major projects, but we do expect that they will follow the rules that they agreed to. Again, these are not our rules. We came in, inherited the park, we inherited all the rules. We did not make the rules, and all we're doing is just saying, hey, there's a new standard. The standard is the rules that people have known about, some cases for 10, 20 years, and we need your help to kind of partner with us as we improve the community, increase occupancy, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, if we're going to improve things and put it in a dog park, and we hear that people don't want a dog park, we probably won't put it in a dog park. But generally, people want to live in a safe, clean, and friendly place, so we're trying to create those places within a community.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry, did you have?
Yeah. Actually, Ron asked one of the ones, how open were you to tenant participation? And then CPI was bounced around a little bit, and in the event, and I frankly haven't checked the CPI, I meant to do that today to see whether Southern California CPI was way higher than San Francisco. And that fluctuation, I just didn't have a chance to spread that out. So how open would you be going forward, or maybe even changing that? And that may be a legal question, so I don't.
No. If I can jump in, I shared this with Bob last week. The actual, if people don't know, the LA CPI actually has been abolished. It's actually split now. So it's LA and then Riverside. So there's 2 separate ones. And what the lease speaks to is, in the event a CPI index like this has been abolished, then we'll use something similar. So that has already addressed the issue. So what we'll do is we'll send out something telling them that we'll pick up the San Francisco CPI, which, by the way, it's 2.9 and 3%. So they're right next to each other. Yeah.
And then the other question is, you had mentioned that even though folks had signed long-term leases, that it didn't lock them in. Obviously, people want that reassurance that things aren't going to go up. But let's say, and again, to throw this out, 7 years into it, all of a sudden I come to you and I say, I'd like to renegotiate. Obviously, that has, whenever you renegotiate something, that could be good or bad, or you're opening up Pandora's box. Some folks will say, I don't want to open up Pandora's box. Some folks may say, you know what, I'm going to roll the dice because I think I can do better. How open would you be for that individually?
We would adjust we would do away with the long-term lease when there's a change in residency.
Well, I know, but I'm talking.
No, generally, it's not fair to some people that are on a 25-year lease to renegotiate with other people that want to change something after 3 years. Really, it's stabilized. So it may be in the first year there's a set amount that the rent would go up in the second year, and it diminishes until it gets to CPI. Then everybody's on CPI.
And that's what I figured the answer would be, but I wanted to clarify because it was sounding like maybe you'd be open to renegotiating the way you had initially put that.
We have this lease as a standard in all of our parks. Most people find it a benefit. That's why most people, so any rent, a rent stabilization would only apply to the smaller percentage of people that haven't signed it, haven't found the benefit in it. And generally, the rent stabilization just almost equals what they're on the long-term lease because it's all based off of CPI anyhow.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying that it's based on CPI, but you also have a minimum of 5%, or depending on the length of the lease, okay. So the first 3 years, all three groups, whether it's 15, 20, or 25 years, have the same increases per year. At the end of that third year, then that's when the 5%, 4.5%, or 4% kicks in, is that right? Because I'm trying to read the lease and it.
So I think you said that they're all the same and they're not. We're giving an incentive for the longer term lease because it makes it easier to administrate.
First 3 years.
The first 3 years,
they're the
yes.
same.
Yes, correct.
So then, in the fourth year, that's when the 5, 4.5, and 4%
correct.
start to operate.
Correct.
But it wasn't clear to me, it wasn't clear to me in reading the lease, and of course, this is only one of the leases, so that is basically, if the CPI is not higher than that amount, that would be your predictability. If I signed a 25-year lease and I get to year 4, I'm gonna get a 4% increase per year. Is that sort of predictable
Correct.
thing? Unless there's some unusual capital expense or operational expense that isn't your normal thing that you actually fold into your management costs generally anyway.
And it's very rare, yes.
Very rare.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see the rarity reflected in the lease agreement, and I am not clear from the lease agreement about the 4% or 4.5 or 5% being the ongoing rate
Well,
beyond that first.
I can only tell you that it's rare from the past. I can't predict the future. I mean, we could have a landslide or a big earthquake or something that would change the rarity of it.
Okay, I just wanted to, point that out, but I think there's a lot of other people here who want to speak, so in the interest of fairness, let's open it up to other folks. Yes, why don't you?
I'll make mine quick. I'm not from your area, but I'm very familiar with the.
Okay, if you could speak from up there, that would be great. The reason, this doesn't amplify in the room, but it
Oh, I talk
does,
loud enough. People
it does pick up
having trouble
the camera.
to hear me talk. Well, then, Mr. Gonzalez, you've heard me talk before. My name is J.R. Rose. I live in Ukiah. I'm one of the reasons that the rent stabilization deal was passed in Ukiah. For the people there, we had Rancho Del Rey was our main part. It took me 5 years and working with Phil Baldwin and the other council members down there, Roden and the rest of them, to find a homeowners ordinance that was good, not only for the people that lived there, but also for the owner that owned it. In other words, it's a two-way street. And if you read this ordinance that Ukiah adopted and went into it, and I'll tell you what, in the years that it's been in there, there's never been an arbitration. And right now, if you talk to Sage down there, you'll find out there's $20,000 in the kick in case it goes to arbitration. That's for the city councils to take into it. So it pays for itself over the long term. The only kick in it is if 51% of the people in the park challenge the homeowners, the park owners, about certain races and stuff, then they have to prove that they need that money to do those improvements. And this is where the kick comes in, because they don't want to open their books and show you whether they need that kick or not. And the council would have the right to look into that to see whether it works. It is a very good ordinance. I hope you take it in your deal to adopt that ordinance, because, like I say, it's fair for everybody. And there's 7 mobile home parks there in Ukiah that are covered under it. And the persons that brought this to us and we had the trouble with are now back in Modesto. And for your information, the CPI is checked every year in June.
and it's so scattered out through the country. And as far as that ordinance, mobile home ordinance in LA, I wouldn't ever try that. I looked at it, and it's not the greatest thing in the world. The one you got, I think you'll find that Ukiah is a fair ordinance. I hope you adopt it. And to bring it to your attention, in 2009, I came in here, and the city council here made resolutions for senior citizens. I hope you look at the old resolutions, and you won't find my name on it, but you guys are good enough to do it. I'm getting out of time. I never go over my time, but it's good to see you again. But I came out of retirement for this. I live in Ukiah, and talked with your city manager there, and I think you should know that this ordinance in Ukiah works, and it has worked in years, and it never cost the city a dime. And when they talk about suing you, they can't sue you because it goes into this, and they have to take it to arbitration. And there's your arbitrator right there, sitting right there. Thank you.
Mitch, can I ask you a quick question? You mentioned the $20,000 that the city has. Where does that money come from?
That money comes from a part from the park owners and a part from the people that live in the park.
And yearly or something they contribute?
They pay every month. They pay the
Okay.
rent, and that money comes into the city coffers, and is set aside
For arbitration?
for arbitration and for the stuff that does. And if you talk to Sage, he was the assistant manager then, but Chambers is gone. But if you talk to Sage, you'll find out that this one works.
All right, I just want to know where the money came from.
And
Thank you.
I have a question about that too. In the city of Ukiah, there's a lot more units involved, but how much does each unit on average pay per month to the city's fund as opposed to the rent?
It runs somewhere around $4 to $5
A month.
A month,
It's,
yeah.
it's not that much for the person that owns the mobile home, but the owner has to match it.
Oh, okay.
So if they come into it, they have to match the money.
Okay.
Now, lately, excuse me for talking beyond my time, but I talked to Sage, and lately they've been giving some of the money back to the people, when they haven't had to use it for arbitration. That's all up to the city council. But like I said, I'm 77 years old now, but I heard about this, and I thought, well, I talked to your city manager and explained to it. And the reason, you won't find my name on it, but I think you know me very well, that I did it, because I used to have my own TV show, and I used to write a column for the paper, and people used to listen to me then, but I they don't want to listen to me too much, but I hope you people listen to me and help your constituents here.
Well, we're going to listen to everybody who wants to come up.
But yeah, I'm gonna get out of here, folks, you guys.
I would request that we don't clap for speakers, no matter how great they express themselves, and no matter how much you agree with them. If we start doing that, it kind of disrupts the meeting. So next, did you have a comment? No? No, okay. So just come up as you wish in any order. And it's sort of nice if there's one person waiting for the next turn. Keeps us moving.
Hi, my name is Uriella Mitchell, and I am your neighbor from up north, Arcata, California. And November 1st, 2017, we just passed our own rent stabilization ordinance. And we mobile home owners pay $5 a month into the fund. We're still new at it, we're loving it. And I strongly urge you, from the depths of my heart, for you, council, if you care to leave a legacy of preserving and protecting and maintaining your affordable housing for the citizens of your community, that you skip over that option number 2 you're considering to try to negotiate a lease between the park owners and the park residents, and skip right over to this ordinance that the previous gentleman talked about in Ukiah. I don't know all the details of Ukiah's ordinance, but I'm sure it is much better than just having a lease, because one thing a lease does not include, which I haven't heard anybody talk about here yet tonight, is this thing called vacancy control. And what that is I'm living in my mobile home, I'm paying $500 a month rent, I die, my heirs sell my home, the new owners can then, if they want to, arbitrarily can double that rent, charge $1,000 or $100 more. Now, what an ordinance does, I'm sure it's written into Ukiah's and it's written into ours, and that is when a home is vacant, the next owner only has a minimal increase in rent. The owners can't go crazy and increase it by, $50, $75, $100, because then that will, by attrition, knock out any affordable housing for people. So vacancy control is so very important, and that's in an ordinance. I don't think you're going to find it in any lease. And so please, we in Arcata spent many months in this ad hoc committee stage. It was ultimately a waste of time for our council, for our city staff, for our homeowners, for park owners, because there's just too much difference in between what, as park owners, we need to protect us and what park owners want and desire for maximum profits. So please, skip option number 2, go straight to investigating the ordinance. It will give you a beautiful legacy that you'll leave for your citizens.
Hi, my name is Patty Rose. I'm the Gizmo, Golden State Manufactured Housing Organization League of anyhow. I'm the zone vice president, and so I represent manufactured home owners all the way from Del Norte down to Solano, and 15,000 houses total. And I've been in a lot of these meetings, and I started out with this wonderful speech about how important it is to save homes for low-income people who are living in low-income houses that are not subsidized by tax holders. And then I heard our silver-tongued park owners up here, and I'm hearing them talk about gentrification and the great things they're going to bring to your community. And I'm going, I'm in the trenches. I'm in the trenches every day. And I hear this stuff every day. And the people that they are misplacing, I'm the one who holds their hands when they lose their houses. There's a terrible imbalance of power, and you've heard people already make comments about how, yeah, we were intimidated into signing that lease. There is no such thing as a lease that doesn't benefit the park owner. The park owners have a bevy of lawyers, and they fine-tooth comb every single word, and we're ordinary people, maybe with a college degree, but we're not lawyers, and we can't deal with the stuff that they put in these leases. We need a rent stabilization ordinance, and the reason you need it is when they drive these low-income people out of your community, or when they increase the rents, all of that money that they would have spent with your local business people are now going to go out of the community and down someplace else where all of these investors live. The other thing that's going to happen is when they can't afford to live in this community anymore, they can't afford to be employees in your community anymore. And therefore, the services that they provide do not come home to you. Another comment is the CPI. We all talk about the CPI. What is the CPI? But it's a whole series of expenses that go into making the cost of living. Very small percentage of that is housing, or 40% of it is housing. But we're going to give them a 5% CPI. My Social Security hasn't gone up that much in 3 years. So I'm sorry that I'm angry, and you can tell that I'm pretty excited about this, and I really hope that you will give these people down here a rent ordinance and find a way to stabilize their rents. It's, never mind, it's all good.
Hi, my name is Bill Barksdale. I live here in Willits. I just have a few observations. Mobile home parks in Willits and virtually every place in the country serve a very specific and essential segment of the market, primarily affordable housing for low-income people. It's an unusual market in that many of the tenants own their own homes, but not the land beneath their homes. These tenants have a substantial capital investment in those properties. Investors have a reasonable expectation that each tenant will maintain their unit and the land that it sits on in a reasonable, safe, sanitary, socially acceptable condition so as not to cause devaluation of neighboring tenants' property or the investor's property. When an investor enters this specialized market with its special customers, those investors have an ethical obligation and perhaps even a legal obligation to those tenants.
Good evening. My name is Jane Cam, and I live at the Grange Mobile Home Park, and but I'm here in support of the matter at hand. And I just want to point out that California Governmental Title 25 was incorporated, when the California Department of Housing and Urban Development assimilated the mobile home park regulations under their umbrella, the goal was to keep rents equal to low-income housing or housing of those fixed incomes. Most of the mobile home parks, I believe, are for 55 and over, and I'm in the fortunate position of not having to live on a fixed income, but many of my friends and neighbors are. And the CPI, I think, was mentioned going up 2.9 to 3%, and certainly, as somebody pointed out earlier, Social Security does not go up that much. And I don't even believe that property taxes go up that much for people that own the land. So I would urge the council to consider adopting the I forget what it was called, but the rent, thank you, the rent stabilization that UCAIA has in place. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Cordova. I'm a tenant at Mobile Wagon Wheel, and I just want to say that, you know, the owner's words were nice, but it has not been a pleasant experience. There has not been good relations. The very first time I met him was last Thursday. There are no meetings, no warnings, threats of fees, threats of lawsuits. And so, you know, the words are good, but there's a whole lot of BS in those words. And I just think you should know. And I think that the amount of people that were threatened to sign those long-term, I mean, they were like, I only have this many days. And I was talking to a lot of them. I only have this many days and I have to get, and they were like, you know, in the panic mode. So, you know, words are good, but if they're not true, hey. So I strongly hope that you guys will help us out here. And I don't believe one word of what this guy says or what that guy says. I don't believe them. I don't trust them. I've seen what they do, and it's not right. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Priscilla Tarver. I'm the outreach person at the Willits Senior Center. So I've been dealing with a lot of the tenants that have been coming from all the parks, and then just other citizens that are concerned about the situation. I have a few questions. One, the 2020, when it gets to 605.85, that's definitely going to be 2/3 of some people's income. And if they can't pay that, and they can't live there, and those mobiles are too old to move, so the city couldn't give them permits to move them, and they don't have the money to move them, and if somebody gave them the money to move them, if they were movable, where would they take them? Okay, so also the rents that can be adjusted by capital improvements, is that included in the CPI or at that time, or is that extra? Let's see, and one pass-through over another, it adds up. It might be amortized $8 over this amount of time, but then if there's 3 or 4 of those things being amortized over a certain amount of time, that's not any longer $8 a month. That's now maybe $30 a month. So $30 a month plus your rent hike, and now you're 2/3 into your income. And yes, I know there is a assistance program available. Some of the things that are asked of these people should not be asked of these people, because I know that in CDC's applications, a lot of the stuff that they're asking is not in those applications. And the approved, let's see, we were talking about approved items on the porch. What is approved? That's a very broad statement. I have no idea what that is. What specifics are allowed there? Okay, barbecues, bikes, and something I missed. But approved, yeah, but what is approved? Who's determining what's approved? What are those specific items?
We never received anything like that, so we don't know.
Okay, so, okay, when you're saying you're investing in the community, that's true to a point, but as the other person said really fast, that all those rent monies and everything else that comes to them gets spent in their community, not here. The city, I know, receives some type of revenue, but it's not equal to what gets spent over there. Can I just have one more second?
Yes, you're still
Okay. And is there something else besides a CPI that is used to, that, is there another form of yeah, I don't know if there's something other than a CPI, but, and that's it. No, one more thing. No, that's it. It just went through. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So hi, I also live at Wagon Wheel Trailer Park / Willits Mobile Home Park now, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the children there. I work at the schools. I work at the after-school program. I also work in the summer camp programs. I see a lot of these children. Sabrina, you work with children as well. Mr. Gonzalez, you work with children as well. We are not the only ones being affected by this. So are our children, because their parents are stressed out about you guys upping our rent, first of all. Second of all, we have speed bumps in our trailer park. We also have a park in our trailer park, and we all have yards for our dogs to run around and do their business in. So you guys coming in to do a new park, new speed bumps, a new dog park, we have all that. We have a dog park in Willits. We like walking our dogs. We can go across town. Our town is not very big. We live in a town, not a city. We are not a big city. We are not a little city. We do not live by San Francisco. We do not live by LA. We do not live by Sacramento. We are Northern California. We are a small town. We take pride in our community. Some of us work 2 and 3 and 4 jobs just to be able to afford to live in your trailer park. You want to up that rent on us? How fair is that to us, not to mention our children? That is not okay at all. Our poor children have to see us go through this. They have to see the neighbors go through it. They have to see their grandparents go through it. Some of the families in there is not only their parents live there, but their children live there and their grandchildren live there. They are being affected by this. I see it. And all these children. It is not okay. Please give us this ordinance, because the city of Willits, they need it. These people need it. These children need it. They don't. Thank you.
Remember what I said? Yeah, if you want to do that, okay. But the clapping is just really burns time up, and we have lots of people who want to speak. So,
hi, my name's Cindy Logan. I live on Pine Mountain, out on the outskirts of Willits. Hi, my name is Cindy Logan. I live on the outskirts of Willits. I don't live in the city limits. But a couple of the things I heard tonight when the owners were doing their presentation, I just wanted to point out because they were kind of red flags to me. One, when you have a 25-year lease, it's over the useful life of a mobile. And I'd be curious to see what they allow for as far as once the mobile starts breaking down is beyond its useful life on a lease that goes longer than that, and what they are going to have for standards for replacement of that at that time. And basically, when can they force a removal of a mobile, and under what circumstances? Because they spoke about the new mobiles they want to put in. That was one of the things they mentioned. I didn't appreciate the veiled threat about, oh, there's a lawsuit against somebody who has mobile home rent control. There's over 100 different communities right now in California that have some form of rent control, so this isn't a new issue, and that didn't even need to be mentioned. That kind of set a tone that irritated me a little. And then the third thing is when you put in you could have a CPI increase, you could say 75% of the CPI of whatever, you could tie it to dogs and cats for all you know. I mean, it could be anything. It's whatever you choose. So it doesn't have to be directly the CPI for Oakland, San Francisco. It could be 75% of the CPI of Oakland, San Francisco, or whatever you choose. And I think that you need to keep your low-income housing stock going and make sure you're in compliance with that. And this is a good way to do it. And it's different than regular rent control because these people actually own their homes. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing? I don't think so. Yes. Those who want to speak, if you could kind of be ready, that's helpful.
Good evening. Jean Jennings, been in Wagon Wheel for almost 28 years. The most important thing I want to say is I have talked to several people who have been fees added to their rent because their rent was considered late. If you pay on the 7th of the month, it doesn't matter what time of day. The 7th of the month is from 12 to 12. A lot of people have told me that, well, they were told by the manager that if you didn't pay by 5 o'clock on the 7th, you're going to get a late fee. And people have been charged that. Some people have been charged that. Some people have had that taken off because they really complained about it. So, double standard. If you do pay your rent on the 7th, it doesn't matter what time as long as it's not midnight, take a witness with you so you have some basis to say, this isn't fair. They keep saying beautify the community, beautify the community. Investors do not invest unless they want money. And that's exactly what they're after. It's not beautification, it's money in their pockets, out of our pockets. That's it.
Hello, my name is Steve Chesser.
Hi, Steve.
I wanted to point out that I was going to sign this lease. We were given a sample packet and to take home and look it over. Really bad copies. You couldn't read most of it. A lot of it, the outside edges were blurred. So I had made an arrangement to go sign the lease and told the lady out here in the valley that I'd like to have a lawyer look at it, like it suggested in the sample packet. I was told I could not take the lease off the property to have a lawyer look at it. Red flag right there. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Some of us weren't even offered that chance to
please,
sign that lease.
Sorry.
I know me and my husband weren't.
Please don't.
Hello, my name is Randy Dalton, and I've lived here in Willits for about 5 years. I grew up in Laytonville for 35 years, and we had a trailer that we bought for $7,000 and installed it for $7,000 through CDC. And we lived in that for 5 years until a Farmers Home Administration house was built. But I don't know what the rents are. I heard $450 a month. And I'm thinking that's $6,000 a year, $500, a month, times 12 months, that's $6,000 a year, times 10 years is $60,000, times, you're talking about huge amounts of money here. And I know math. I'm on SSI. I hit zero. I get $10 at the end of the month. And in mathematics, 0 times any other number is still 0. I hit rock bottom. I'm bottom. I'm bottoms up. But I'm as rich in spirit as they come. I've got beautiful children. They all live here close. I love my babies. I love my grandchildren. And I think quality of life, to you people who are coming from out of town, I really appreciate what you said about this is a small town. Casper, Laytonville, Willits, it's a small town. We know each other. We talk together. If there's a problem, we can go. We know who we are. People come in from out of town. That's an investment. But I think property is theft. A friend of mine told me property is theft. You come in naked, you leave naked. Can't take anything with you. Okay? Our job here is stewards. We are to be caretakers and caregivers, good neighbors, taking care of each other as though we care. This is our lives. We don't have anything else but this. Heaven is all around. And I'm talking spiritual because it's a heart thing and a mind thing. And if we can't understand, when you talk about $8 a month, if that's my gallon of milk or my loaf of bread, we're going to go hungry. You're going to go hungry. We're not talking $10,000 a month. I'm talking ground zero. So I think that the COLA, the cost of living, if it takes 2% a year for Mother Earth to grow. You plant a seed, it takes 10 years before it'll bear fruit. 2% a year. All this stuff, $1 trillion, stock market's going up 2,000%. I'm sorry, I don't own stock except my babies and my cats, kittens. There's got to be a reality check of what is real. What is really real here. And love is in here because God's love never goes away. It's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow when I walk with the Lord. I don't know how many of you believe in Creator, but I do. And I know that whatever we leave, how you leave this office today, this meeting, what you take home with you in your hearts is going to determine the future of all these people that are here, plus all the children and the people that are beyond. I want to know where the parks are for the people. We need 10 acres of open space so they can maybe play softball, maybe plant an orchard, a community garden. I'm a dreamer. I live in the world the way I want it to be. Because I think that we're really lost, a lot of us. If 50% of the budget that you're collecting was to go for peace, not war, I think we'd have a better world. And I dream dreams, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the council on this matter? And as I said before, then I will not close the hearing yet because I want the council to discuss this. And, did you want to speak? Cheryl?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, my name is Cheryl Abney. I've lived in the park for 10 years. And Boa Vida, there's been a lack of communication for almost a year. And the only reason they want to communicate now is because rent stabilization is on the table. Okay, a year ago, or actually last summer, one of the threatening letters, residents sent certified letters to Drita Bronchi. Here's 2 of them, about 30 of them came back. So this is an example of their communication. And I think that they're just trying to buy time by a committee to delay rent stabilization so that they can go ahead and raise the rent again while we're waiting and meeting in a committee. And that's all I have to say.
Could I ask a clarifying question? Were those returned because nobody signed for them?
Yeah, there were about 30 of them. These are only 2 that were returned.
I had it returned one else.
It's a copy of what the letters were in response to.
So in other words, they were not accepted by the addressee?
They were not accepted by Drita, no. Okay. Approximately 30. I don't have all 30, but because these belong to the people.
Thank you. Okay, so for now, the public comment is over, but after the council has addressed their questions and concerns, I'll give people a little tiny, maybe 30 seconds to a minute if you need to you know, to respond to something you heard if you can't bear it. But bear in mind that we have heard all of you, and we are listening the whole time. So you don't have to repeat yourself. We've heard the comments that have been made. So, council members, who would like to lead off here? I kind of would like Sabrina, if you are ready, because you had that meeting with them, with the,
Sure.
both. It'd be nice to start.
What would you like from me?
Well, if you have something.
What are my thoughts?
Yeah.
I appreciated that both the tenants and the homeowners were willing to come to the table. I know that it was hard for both parties, not sure what to expect in that first meeting. I felt like that it was really just an opportunity for both sides to be heard, but there's definitely lots of room for discussion. I share concerns. Some things that I heard tonight that I made note of is, for example, I think park owners need to clarify, for example, about the time on the 7th for the rent being due. I have had experience with situations of vacancy control, so that was something that concerned me that we didn't get into in our conversations this last week, that I think that the council needs to take into consideration, whether we form an ad hoc or we're looking at an ordinance, because not stating that this is a situation now, but it is something that I've seen occur in other parks where the rent goes up and then somebody has to move, or their mobile home park, or their mobile is deteriorating, and for example the park owner wants them to change the skirting or do all these other things that really aren't within their financial means to meet the standards of the park rules. So that's something that that's on my mind. And then also the property taxes. Somebody made a good point that the property taxes are not increasing at the rate of the CPI, and then just one thing that concerned me is that when the park management did come in, I think that they would admit, and certainly it seems to be evident, that they didn't take the time to properly introduce themselves to the community. And I think that we all sometimes make mistakes, and then you have to figure out, you know, how can we go forward. So yes, we have to acknowledge mistakes that they've made in the past, or any mistakes in not properly communicating. But in order to move forward, we also have to have a line of communication too. So whether the council decides to move forward with an ordinance or reform an ad hoc, it's really important that the tenants continue to come forward in the conversation. So that's just something that's weighing on my mind.
Okay. Who else would like to comment? Don?
This is, it's not a simple thing. You know, I've listened to the tenants, and I've heard you before, you know, at the last meeting, and I was close to where you are right now at one point. There was a period in my life when I had a house, and I had a mortgage payment, and I had no job, and I had to make a daily decision about paying the electric bill or buying a can of soup, literally. And I had kids to raise. Fortunately, I'm not there anymore. So, but you never forget that experience of being helpless and being at someone else's mercy. So that's one side of the thing. Then, of course, you know, you have the situation where, you know, we all have different economic situations, and some of us are, or some are it's harder for, you know, to get together to live a lifestyle that you would like to live, even a minimum, and I get all that. So how do you improve people's lots in life? So we have a situation here. We have the park. We have tenants, people who've lived there for a number of years, and obviously years ago they had a choice that they had to make. They had to live somewhere. So your choices are, you buy a property if you have the money to do that, you rent an apartment or something like that, or you invest a larger amount of money into a trailer and you park it at an RV park or a trailer park and you live there. And every one of these things has a cost associated with it. And each one of us makes that decision based on, what our means are and what we're able to afford. And unfortunately, for most of us, and I'm with you too, I'm retired, I'm living on a fixed income. I'm looking forward to living for another couple of years, and I hope. Well, it's interesting. I'm going to be 81 years old in a couple of months. And I sat down, I love spreadsheets, and I sat down and did a spreadsheet to see how my money would last for the next 20 years, because I want to live to be 100. That's my goal. And I scoped it out, And, it looks, it's doable, but the problem is that with the way the market's been going, the way things are going, you never know from day to day if you're going to lose it all. I mean, 10 years ago, a lot of people lost a lot of money for a period of time. And that's scary, especially when you get older and you don't have enough time to recover, to get it back again and hope that you don't have to live on cat food for the rest of your life. And that's the goal. So, that's the baseline here. And I know that's not giving a whole lot of you a lot of comfort because, it's not solving your problem, but there may not be a solution to this problem. We all have to live how we can live. So, a way to do this, of course, is to, subsidize housing or, help you to pay for your rent and provide a place for you to live that will provide you with a good quality of life. But all of this comes at a cost. Somebody has to pay for this. So it's either going to be you, or it's going to be the park owner, or it's going to be the government. Money doesn't fall from the sky. These things are the hard realities of getting by. So when I'm listening to all of this is going through my mind here. Do any of you want to live in a, you're in your park, you're in your trailer, and you're, hopefully, comfortable and safe and secure. I think we all want to live in an environment that is safe and clean and healthy, that our kids can play in the streets or whatever, that we don't have to worry about gangs coming through the neighborhood and doing nasty things, So how do we provide this stuff for ourselves? Or how do we have someone provide it for us? So if collectively you have a problem in taking care of this yourself because you don't have the financial resources, then we turn to the park owner. Now, in the last couple of years, our national psyche has gotten really nasty. I think we've seen the beginnings of a real class war, and I hate it. I really hate it. So it seems like anybody who has any kind of money is the enemy. And we hate these people because of who they are. But I don't think that's right or that's fair. So is it fair for us to expect a property owner to put out a whole lot of money to make our lives a little better and at the risk of losing an investment? And that's why else would they invest in a property unless they were going to make a profit? And profit is not a dirty word. Excess profit is a dirty word. But profit itself, there's no incentive. That's what America is based on. So to expect that, the park owner is going to lay out however much money is required to make your lives perfect is unreasonable, I think. Now, the city, we can be the big bully. We can pass an ordinance, and we can force all kinds of things down your throats and their throats. I've been doing this for 12 years, almost, and it's not my favorite way of doing things. I don't like to dictate to you or to a property owner or someone who's investing their fortune in something. I don't like to put myself in that position where I have to tell them how to run their business. In my experience, the best way to deal with problems like this is to sit down and talk. I really do not like the idea of mandating something, because whenever you craft an ordinance, there's always something wrong with it. I don't care how good these other ordinances are. It's a socialist welfare state, and whenever you try to do that, Soviet Russia collapsed because of this. They were telling people how much food to plant or whatever, and what kind, or who should do what job. You can't do that. We have to be able to figure this out ourselves. So I would say that the best thing that this city can do is to use a bully pulpit, if you will, to bring the sides together and talk out the problems. I think you are all reasonable people, and solutions can be found to work this stuff out.
Jerry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually.
Some of those twitch.
Ron, are you done? No. Okay. When this came forward last year, I attended the meeting that Priscilla had put together, listened. Obviously, I did a little research and learned that, some of the complaints regarding the cleaning up the yards, et cetera, weren't in our purview to a point. Obviously, I talked to our city attorney, and there are some things we can do. I think we would get on the owners to get on you to clean, if there was a health and safety issue or whatever. So obviously, it's their job to address those issues. And I think I said in that meeting that I didn't really see anything wrong with some of the cleanup issues. Obviously, how you go about it may be a little different, as far as reaching out and being polite, et cetera, and going there. And I'm not going to hear a dispute one way or the other. I've heard both sides. I listened to everybody at that meeting. I followed up. I sought out Mr. Abrigati, and he sought me out, and I met with him. And at the time, I told him, this may come back in the future, and the better job you do, obviously, I said at that meeting there were some PR issues. He had his, version of some of the things, and I said, I get that. You've got your version, they've got theirs, and unless I was on the receiving end, I do know some park residents that live there that told me they signed leases and they were okay with it. I have heard from some of you that you're not okay, that are here today. There's a part of me, I kind of agree with a little bit of what Ron said. I think government's overreach is harsh sometimes and unwarranted. Other times we want government to come in. Obviously, as a former police officer, I overreached a lot of times for your health and safety issues, and that was my role. So I do see that there are times when government needs to step in. So, and I also understand that there's a lot of folks in this town that are kind of barely hanging in there. A lot of the folks that do that. Got to balance that out with, obviously, property owners too, because you don't buy a place. I think Ron said that you expect to get some level of return. It's not like they bought a place to give everybody a free place to live, and I'm assuming nobody here thinks that's the case. But I kind of feel like, I don't think we've exhausted the talk already, but I also don't want to talk things to death. I guess, and I'm going to kind of throw out a sort of motion, because I don't want a thing languishing for a year or something like that. I kind of feel like we need to have another chance at bat to get both sides together, to the point that I think the city should foot the bill at this point as an investment in our community for some sort of mediator. Not one of the council members, not the city manager, not somebody from the property owners, et cetera, somebody that can come in and get both sides to talk. I mean, I'd be willing to say that if we can't come to some agreement by July 1st, that either by September 1st or whatever, that we have an ordinance brought back to us. And I kind of like Ukiah's ordinance. I'm looking at that, and it was nice to see Mr. Rose again. And he put it, I have some questions. I mean, what happens to the folks that, let's say I've signed the lease, are they going to get that bill for the money in the kitty, so to speak, or is it just 45 of you, and what happens to the Grange folks? Those are some issues. That's why I kind of want this looked at a little more, because I want to find out. And I'm going to be honest with you, having worked for the city, I've seen, and I'm going to be honest with you, there are times when the city has dropped the ball. In the interest of full disclosure, there are times when we have ordinances that, because we don't have the staff or the money to follow up on it, and things languish, sometimes things go beyond when maybe they should have. And it's not because we were being mean or anything like that over the years, it's just, we just don't have the staff or the money to sometimes stay on top of some things. And I don't want to rush in and pass an ordinance today or push one today that we're gonna end up messing up down the road. But if it looks like the parties can't get to, I guess, to that point where they agree, then maybe that's where we need to go. So I guess my motion would be that, whether we call it an ad hoc or a working group, that we pursue a mediator of some sort, and that if we don't have action by July 1st, or we hear back from staff at that point that, hey, we couldn't find a mediator that was agreeable to everybody, that, but if we are able to find somebody that, and we don't have action, or we have action by July 1st, that then by no later than September 1st, we bring back an ordinance mirroring Ukiah. So I guess that's my motion.
Okay, before, well, if somebody wants to second that now, fine, but I haven't heard.
I just need to talk for just a minute.
Larry and I have something
Okay.
to say.
I in everybody's thing that they said today, I'm sure it's very, very good. I retired when I retired from teaching, and I was out for 15 years, and I knew I couldn't afford it. So I went back to work, which didn't help a lot of people here. But I'm 80, and I'm still working. And I don't think the city ought to get into this, very truthfully. I just think that it's something that the city charter does not come into rent control or anything like that. We have water, sewer, and the roads, and these kind of things, and these are the things that as a city we're supposed to do. And we're trying to do them with a limited amount of money that we have to do and to run the city. And so my vote is no action.
Okay, I would like to weigh in a few specific things. I tend to be kind of a pragmatist and trying to identify where issues are and not necessarily solve the rest of the world's problems. But anyway, one of the things that a lot of people talked about the Consumer Price Index as whether that's a good measure or not, and which one do you use, et cetera. But the leases that have already been signed, it's almost irrelevant because right now the CPI is way below the 5% or even the 4% for the 25-year leases. In other words, the way the leases have been written, that the bottom end is the 5% for the next 3 years, or the 4% if you've got a 25-year lease after that, and 4.5 and 5. So normally, in other contracts that I've been involved in, it's the CPI or up to a maximum of, but this is sort of the opposite. If the CPI goes over 5%, you'll have to pay that. But if the CPI is under 5%, you're still going to have the 5% raise for the next 3 years, and then whatever term lease you had with that. But that even the 4% is more than the CPI has been for quite a few years, I believe. And it certainly also, the tax was pointed out that property taxes, once a new owner has paid, once the property is reevaluated when a new owner buys it, from then on until that owner sells it, it's limited to a 2% per year raise. So the 5% base rate that we're talking about is more than the CPI, and it's more than the tax increase. And the other, so that's one thing. And you know, certainly the owners bought it expecting to make a profit, and if they want to propose 5% per year or 4% per year, and you sign that lease, that's what you're obligated to do. I don't necessarily think that's reasonable in terms of a rate of return. They're getting all these rents. They are operating their operating expenses, but those sort of major expenses like taxes and the consumer price index are not going up at that same rate. The thing that I think concerns me the most in the leases, and again, we can't really do anything about the people that already signed leases, but is the page 4 on the sample lease that I have anyway, talks about increases for operational expenses. And I've heard the owner and the manager say that they basically don't pass on most of those kinds of things unless it's really exceptional. But if you read the language in there, it looks like they could pass on virtually any of those things. I'm not going to read it out. I could, but it looked to me like it covered just about anything, like filling a pothole or putting potted plants up or anything, really. And I'm glad that they don't generally. It's their MO not to pass that on to residents, but under the lease, they have the legal right to. And it doesn't have anything about those tenants being able to weigh in. Do they want that extra expense added to their rent or not? So all of that, and I think it was pointed out that one of the reasons the owners and managers are now beginning to do more communication is because there is this fear on their part that we might pass a rent stabilization ordinance. It's perfectly understandable that would make them more willing to spend some time communicating with the tenants and with the city. But it doesn't necessarily guarantee anything going forward. On the other hand, we're a small town. There's only about 45 units that are still not under long-term lease in this mobile home park, and there's 14 at the Grange and a few other scattered. So it's not like Ukiah where you can spread the cost of administering some kind of oversight to a lot of different units. That is one of the things that concerns me, is just administratively, if we sign up for a rent stabilization ordinance, the ratio of how many tenants are actually going to benefit from that and how much it costs us to provide that governmental oversight, if you want to call it that. So I'm not sure what the best solution is, but I think I'm not particularly convinced that just communication is the only avenue available. I think you can promise, it's like being a candidate for public office. You can promise all sorts of things, and then what's in the fine print, what's in the legal obligation. I tend to feel like this is an area where it might be worth government stepping in and providing some oversight, or some kind of a ceiling, so that our low-income and senior citizens who rely on this very limited stock of low-income housing have that assurance and have some kind of governmental role in this. It isn't, I mean, we have such a limited stock of housing that's available for those lower income people. So I tend in that direction, but I also am really, as I said, concerned about how that administrative part with when we're only talking about, 60 units or 70 units is going to be feasible for us as a small town. So I'm not really ready to go to, right now, let's bring that Ukiah ordinance in here and adopt it in the next few months. But I also am not sure that talking alone is going to solve the long-term picture. So,
I have a follow-up comment.
okay, follow-up comments, and then if there's a clarification from anybody who wants to make it very short. So Sabrina and Jerry.
I'm just thinking about when I ran for public office, and why did I run for public office, and why did people vote for me? And I understand that the city of Willits is responsible for sewer, water, streets, safety, those basic things that you all expect. But I believe that people also vote for the council because of their character, their morality, hopefully their leadership skills, and their community involvement. And those are all things that I hope that we're all taking into account when we're sitting here, that we're not just taking care of sewer, water, streets, and safety, but we have an obligation to each of these people who vote to put us in this position. And I don't take that lightly. And I know that I tend to have the unpopular vote, as I seem to have tonight, but I do believe that I've listened to both sides respectfully, and I do think that we need a rent ordinance. And I like Jerry's idea. I have some concerns about your idea, though. I'm curious as to if we did set up something, Jerry, where we set out a meeting 3 or 4, what are we looking at, 4 months? 4 months out, what's going to happen to those people who haven't signed a lease agreement? Is there any consequences to them if we take, in stretching out this process? And then also, just a comment that even if there was one of you that was impacted, we should never undervalue, even if there was just one person that was sitting right there in that chair and they came to us as a council. Yes, they're not a large group. Willits isn't a large community. And sometimes people might say, the community of Willits, they're real small, and the rest of Northern California, this is what they want, so we're not going to care what this small town in Northern California needs. Well, each of our needs needs to be considered, and so that's weighing on my mind, and I'm thinking about that. So before I would second Jerry's motion that's on the table, I would ask if someone could give me some kind of a clarification, whether it be the park owners or city manager, about what kinds of consequences that we don't understand or benefits could take place if we were to wait. You want to repeat your motion?
Well, and maybe as part of this question, because I had that on the back of my mind, and what could we do to kind of freeze things if and I'm not sure when things would kick in, because again, if the talk is productive and you guys can figure this out yourselves, then I'm for waiting on that. But at the same time, I don't want to languish and have everybody say they're stalling or the city's stalling, etc. But at the same time, I want to make sure that folks are treated fairly.
Can we get some clarification on that?
So, and the other thing I wanted to point out, Madge, to what you said earlier, taxes include more than just the base rate. We could sit up here and raise sewer rates, and those get passed on in the taxes, or the school could vote in a new bond, and even though the park doesn't send kids to school, they'd be responsible for those extra costs that I think would be appropriate to pass on, so again, maybe Jim could answer that, or maybe we could get
I also would like to clarify, I think that each tenant also still has to pay, they get passed through the cost of sewer and water. Correct.
Yes.
So that's on top of the base rate.
I think to clarify my question, I'd like to hear from the park owners. My question is, if tenants did not sign a lease with you in 4 to 7 months, what could the unintended consequences be?
Well, it'd be a rent increase. It would be a rent increase in November.
Okay.
November
of 2018.
18, so this year.
So if we were to, hearing the proposal, if we were to sit down, or we had an arbiter, if you had an opportunity to sit down with the tenants and work that out, and let's say you still didn't come to an agreement and we went to a rent ordinance later, what could and it happens before November, all this takes place obviously before November, could there be any consequences of choosing this route? To the tenant.
I think to the tenant. I think I need a little clarification, and for the record, there's no Esquire after my last name, so not an attorney.
Right. I'm
but
talking about financially.
Financially, you're asking if there will be a rent increase for anyone that hasn't signed a long-term lease, I think, is what you're asking.
That is what I'm asking.
Yeah, and I think it would only be fair based on the fact that close to 70% of both parks have signed long-term leases, that even though they haven't signed a lease, that they do get a rent increase. What I can do tonight in public, on the record, to tell you is we'll make it the same as everybody else's, knowing that we're working towards, a common goal of an agreement that works for everybody. So it would be $35.
So you would agree that you would charge more than $35 next November, 2018?
Absolutely. I've got my wallet in my hand, so put it away.
Well, again, my thing is I don't want to impose something on you guys without, if the talk was productive the other day. Honestly, I thought about doing the same thing that Sabrina did, and I'd actually reached out to our local representatives, see if the state had somebody or they wanted to weigh in, and they didn't weigh in. So that's why I'm thinking the city may want to pony up and at least offer this, and then if it doesn't work, then we've tried, and then before government reaches down and affects the private property owners or intrudes in your lives, then at least we've done our part.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
And then also, what could we potentially be looking at if we were to pay for some kind of arbitration?
I'll answer first, and then I'll ask Jim to amplify that. It's been my experience that it's not cheap, as you can imagine. I think a mediator runs
$1,500 a day.
Something like that.
So if we budgeted no more than
So Jerry,
$3,000?
what if I felt like that something positive came out of our meeting, maybe not as much as both sides would have liked, but again, it was just a first step. That I think that before the city spends thousands of dollars, and we already know our budget situation.
Well, I don't want to spend thousands of dollars. I've got to point that out. I'm just offering before we impose the
Let
reach.
Sabrina finish her thought.
Just that we think of how we can give the community. I know the last time we met, it was just, I think we had somebody from the senior center, 2 people from park ownership, 3 tenants, myself and city manager. And I think that what the tenants wanted is they wanted to be able to, as a group, and I think it would be fair that all those tenants who've not yet signed a lease have an opportunity, each and every one of them, to sit in on a meeting. And we wouldn't limit any person who hasn't signed a lease an opportunity to sit in on that meeting. And that's one thing that I would like to ask, so that everybody has a voice at the table.
Well, I guess nothing would preclude in my mind that we set 2 arbitration dates separated, and in between them that there'd be other meetings but we obviously don't have a deep pocket to keep funding multiple arbitration dates, so we set some targets. And again, Bob, this would be, may not fall on you, but.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, what I would suggest, rather if you want to go that route, between myself and Jim, I'm sure we can take a look at mediators that are available and what their costs are, and bring that information back to you so you don't have to make that decision tonight. And then you would, at that point, set, based on mediator availability, you could set the mediation date.
So Bob, can I ask Bob a question?
Yeah, can I just comment first in terms of the motion that is sort of being negotiated here? I tend to think that that there was a productive meeting, a first meeting that already took place with Sabrina and Bob Peralt, and that maybe we should have at least a month to let that progress, if it can, before we start investing in an outside mediator or arbitrator, whichever we are talking about here. And Ron, I'm not sure who should be next. Did you say you wanted to weigh in there, Jen?
Oh, I just was gonna comment that if you accept staff's recommendation of having a meeting, having the city facilitate a meeting with or without an outside mediator that you're paying for, it'd be good to know at the outset that there's a good faith intention to negotiate some of these terms. And you brought up 2 points, Madam Mayor. One was the cost pass-through amounts. The lease is some 21 pages long, and there's paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of all the potential costs that can be passed along, yet the representation is that they don't do that. So I would want to know if they would be willing to take a look at rewriting the provisions of their lease that discuss the pass-through amounts to be more in tune with the representations, and also whether or not they would be open to having a CPI increase that set a cap as opposed to having the floor being 4 or 5%. Because I think those are the 2 basic terms that are going to require negotiation and agreement.
Okay, and yes.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying
Jerry
question.
and,
Do you think it's more appropriate, I could retract my motion and say that maybe we should bring this to an ad hoc before we come back, or what's more appropriate?
I really think that that's up to the council. I'm not trying to dodge a bullet.
I don't want to.
But I'm really saying if it's the council's interest to further communication, then perhaps the ad hoc prior to going to the mediation would be a better route to go.
Yeah, and I would like to also ask Abe here.
Yes, ma'am.
That if we do this and we're negotiating basically, is there any openness on your part to look at some modification of the people that already signed leases in line with the points that Jim and I have both made?
I can say I think there's a possibility for that, yeah. If I can address Jim's first point, which is kind of in general, kind of what's the 45 or so we have left, absolutely. As far as, what's already signed, in the interest of fairness, I think we would probably look at something like that, where we'd make it unilateral.
It would really be unfair if the people that already signed leases paid more than the people that didn't, I think, just doesn't make sense to me.
I understand. Yeah.
And Ron, do you have something?
Yeah, I think we may be borderline overthinking this thing. I mean, I'm not too crazy about outside arbitrators. I mean, I don't know that anybody from the outside, well, there used to be a statement saying that someone who's an expert if they come from 300 miles away. And I don't particularly believe that. I think we're smart enough right here to get an ad hoc committee together, to get the 2 sides sitting down at the table and talking face to face, person to person. I don't think these are insurmountable issues. I really don't. And I think what happens is that these things take on a life of their own. If someone comes in and does something that you don't like, and instead of confronting them, you start complaining about it, it just builds up, and that's not good. I think we can squelch all this by forming an ad hoc committee, having a discussion, and honest, open discussion, and I would bet that we could come to a good solution that way. So I'm going to second his motion.
Okay, well, I think the motion is still sort of being morphed. And I did offer, before we come to a vote on that anyway, I would like, if there's anybody that has specific comment in response to something you heard here, and try to keep it no more than a minute, and please come up again. The reason it's important to come up here is that otherwise it doesn't get reported. And we have a record of our meetings.
It's also the television.
Yeah, the
people at home.
Yes, that's right. There are people watching at home as well. But
now?
Yeah, come on up. And yes, you want to
go? Yeah. Do you mind, or I can wait until she's
Well, you're there.
Okay. So the first thing is that we are not opposed to communication. We do not feel that communication has reached and been exhausted to its end. Last week's meeting was a result of us requesting that meeting with some of the leaders of the community. And the reason we did that was because we learned from other residents in other communities that we have outside the state of California. We realized that they were bringing to our attention that they had been called by the people out in California, and why are they involving us in that? So we realized, okay, we have an issue, so we need to address that issue. We're not perfect people. Maybe we didn't do it in the right amount of time, but I was brought in specifically with this property in February. And so we requested a meeting with some of the people that we thought may have been operating under a little bit of either misinformation or didn't have all the information. That first meeting, I agree, was a good step, and I feel like the rest of the people that are involved have not benefited from that first meeting. So we are directing ourselves as a growing company, as we're taking on additional staff to meet the needs of our communities. We have directed ourselves to have annual meetings at every park, and where we have a senior park, 55 and older, we're going to do twice annually, so once every 6 months, because we feel like there's extra concern that needs to go into those communities. So we are going to be planning communication. It is taking place on our own.
My name is Pat Rainey, and I live in Willits Mobile Home Park. I was told in January that I had only the month of January to make a decision about signing the lease. And if I signed the lease, my rent increase would only be $35. If I didn't sign the lease, it was going to be $60. That's all I know, and I was supposed to make a decision. I think it was a form of fear tactics to get people to hurry up and sign these leases, or they're afraid they're going to have to pay more money. So I think that's what's happened here. So.
Thank you. That's important. And that goes to, I think, Sabrina's question to the owner and manager, is if we are in the process of discussing this and looking at our options, keeping our options open still, we don't want that to be happening, that people are losing the opportunity to get a negotiated settlement on this, rather than be threatened with higher rent than if they sign the lease. It is, clearly that would be very frightening to somebody who's on a fixed income. So there, I see you nodding your head. Is there a commitment on your part?
Madam Mayor, if I can. I think I committed to that already,
Okay.
which was, yes, that
Make
it
sure.
would be $35. So I think we've got that clear, again, for the record, absolutely. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think an ad hoc committee that would meet in the Willits Mobile Home Park or Wagon Wheel Mobile Home Park, however you want to refer to it, in the evening, where all tenants who have not signed the lease are in attendance at least at the next meeting. And if the park owners and would like to bring some sort of, I think they had mentioned something about a park owners association coming to advocate for their side, and the tenants have somebody that wants to come and help advocate for their side. Out of fairness, that seems appropriate for the next step of the next meeting. And that would be my hope, in line with kind of what Jerry had envisioned.
I have two questions. Marge, if I understood you correctly, were you saying, I wanted to talk about Proposition 13? Isn't that like a 2% increase? You've got a limit on how much the property taxes can go up?
On property tax.
On property taxes, 2% a year. Okay, it seems to me that the tenants should not have to be asked to spend more than, a certain amount. The cap, the 5%, the 4%, that just is exorbitant. The other question that I have is, there's a trailer park right down the road from where I live on Monroe that's just a collection in a very small, but there are about 15 trailers. Now, is this ordinance that you're proposing, is it going to be applicable to other trailer parks, other places?
If it's in the city limits.
It is in the city limits, and it's substandard. I mean, I almost feel like I want to take people for a walk.
If we adopt a rent stabilization as a city,
Yeah.
it would apply within the city limits.
It would apply for everybody, because there are so many, substandard conditions in that trailer park. But I'm curious to know whether it would apply, how would you go about having the conditions, be.
We're only dealing with rent.
Okay, I know, but I'm just raising that for.
Yeah, that's another. Yes, please come up. And if there's nobody else lined up, then we're going to close the public hearing.
Riella Mitchell again from Arcata. And when the city of Arcata got to this point in our city council's negotiations, we did form what we called a negotiating committee with all concerned parties, and we were able to have lots of meetings first without an arbitrator, without a mediator, and brought one in at the very end. So just to give you, encouragement in that way, and also to again throw out that word that you, Councilmember Rodriguez, said, vacancy control. So I would like to also say to you, Mr. Lance, that you said that you would like the items that are involved in the negotiating committee to be a good faith, pass-throughs and CPI. Also to put vacancy control very solidly on that negotiating table, because even though it's mostly important for you to maintain your affordable housing for the homeowners themselves, if they should die and their home gets passed on to their heir, oftentimes that heirs will have to pay an exorbitantly high rent. So you would want to make sure you address that. So if an heir inherits, that they will be under some control. Thank you.
Yeah, do keep these follow-up comments really short, since you all got to speak the first time.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to keep the meeting from going till midnight.
I just wanted to say one thing that I forgot to say, is that they said that the owners say that the $50 yard discount is in effect, and my yard's in great shape, and I haven't gotten a yard discount for 2 months. So, proof of the pudding is in the eating, folks. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Nobody has.
Well, somebody else is speaking. If you want to come around and just.
Yeah, I'd like to bring some perspective to the rent increases that they're talking about. And throughout California, the mobile home rental stabilization ordinances, the majority of them limit the CPI increase to a fraction of the CPI. Typically, it's between 60 and 80%. This year's increase that they're talking about is the actual San Francisco rate of the CPI is 2.9% for this year. The increase they're asking for this year is 5.4%. The $35 that he so glibly said he'd be happy to sign off on amounts to a 6% rate increase. And then in the last year, they actually go down a little to 4.3%. Okay, this is like almost double the CPI. This is not a fraction of the CPI. The business model that these people are exercising is more like a corporate raider, where they come into a community and mine the value out of it immediately, and then start looking at a long-term strategy. That's the kind of snakes that you have in your town.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I just want to say something. The reason a lot of those leases were signed is because a lot of the people were threatened about the Hispanic people about being deported to Mexico. And it wasn't these people, it was the other lady that was in charge. I mean, she just came in and told us that they weren't here to make friends, they were here to make money. So, and it's just quite a shock anyway. So I just wanted to say that. That's why there's a lot of leases were signed.
Okay, well, one more person, and then we're going to close the public hearing.
Okay, I just don't know, I need clarification on something. What does a CPI increase translate into dollars per month for a tenant?
Well, if it were 2.9%, that's a 3% increase in the cost of living, apparently. And as we know, that is a basket of different things that are tested in that whole metropolitan area. And then they say, you know, you average that all out, it came out to 2.9%.
Of
So
what?
if-
2.9% of what?
The rent you're paying right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I didn't really
It's
get.
basically a cost of living
Here's an example sheet
measure,
for
yeah.
reference. It was for part of the presentation, that might help.
Okay, so I'm closing the public, oh, did you?
I just wanted to finish one thing.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. And then what, the ad hoc committee, how, you said everybody that's there, is that going to be the people in the ad hoc committee? The tenants and
No.
each side? or-
I'll clarify that.
Okay.
An ad hoc committee is something the mayor appoints, and it has a maximum of 2 council members. It can have some staff members there. And then that ad hoc committee decides what kind of public involvement they want to factor into their deliberations. And Sabrina would certainly be one of the appointments I would make to that committee. And she's saying she wants to open that up, at least some of the meetings, to everybody and have it in the evening at the mobile home park so people could participate. And it would be up to that ad hoc committee how many hearings, or they're not really hearings, but public involvement.
Okay, and then we would have a time frame, correct?
Yes,
I
I
mean,
think
we would
that's
have to have a resolution by a certain time.
Yeah, we would want to make sure that there's
That's good.
quick progress. And also, the ad hoc committee doesn't make any decisions. They make a recommendation back to the council. It's really the 5 council members that vote on any such outcome.
Okay, and then can I just finish with, in that, is this a type of situation that can only be resolved by city council, or is this ever something that can go on a ballot?
I don't know.
I think it can go on a ballot, but the city council also has the ability to pass an ordinance.
So, the city council has that authority, and I don't know what the initiative process would be. If we failed to do it and a bunch of citizens want to bring a matter onto the ballot, I know how it works at the county level. I'm not sure if the city has that, but there are ballot measures, there's provisions for that.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We did put it on the ballot using the initiative process in Humboldt County.
Okay.
And we won by a 10% margin.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
please don't forget that you all have the opportunity to resolve this, and the council could be eliminated from the equation. It could be in the hands of the people and the property owner if we see progress and you're able to negotiate something else. The council is only that next step if you can't come to a resolution. Or putting it on a ballot is another option. But don't forget that first option of communicating and working it out.
Careful what you wish for.
Can I just, can I end my comment? I just wanted to say, you know, I'm not against, I personally am not against, it's their livelihood. This is what they do, you know. It's just, I think in looking at an economically oppressed county, you should be careful at what you're trying to propose, because no matter what, if you're in an economically oppressed county, don't expect to make the profit margin that you do in a higher economic county.
Okay, I am going to close the public hearing, and I know Jerry would like to propose something.
Well, I guess, and Kathy just pointed out, I guess since I think we've morphed back from what I had proposed to an ad hoc, so maybe I would move staff's recommendation from an ad hoc committee, obviously with my intent would be that what I was looking for down the road is that we would at some point pull the trigger if we can't come to some sort of agreement.
You can't say that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm not opening it up to comments, but I do think a time limit is important on this.
So, again, I would move with staff recommendation as my motion, and I would want some time limit, and I would be open to serving on that ad hoc committee too. And so
Could you amend your motion to be maybe just a little bit more specific like you were in the beginning? Could you amend it to say that they will give the ad hoc the opportunity until, I think you said like July 1st or June 30th or something? And then if it's unsuccessful,
Jim,
then
what do you
we'll
think? Is
craft
that-
an
Well,
ordinance?
What I would agree that your motion should set the date that the negotiations will conclude and that the matter will then be brought back to the city. I would not say for the purpose of passing an ordinance. I just think you should bring
All
it
right.
back to the city council after July 1. Or-
All right, so
or
then-
I would-
August 1 or whatever.
I guess August, you know, 'cause they're talking about the rents would go up in November, and so I would say staff's recommendation with the idea that this should come back from the ad hoc committee to the full council no later than August, the first meeting in August.
My personal feeling is that's way too late. I'd much rather have it be a short fuse, and then
Yes,
even if
5
we
months.
extend it, we
Well,
can.
I guess my reason I'd
like May 1st personally.
Well, I don't think that, in light of not knowing whether we could, ultimately, I think as someone suggested, that they tried everybody's talking, and eventually they did get, at the very end, a negotiator or mediator. I want to make sure that that's possible, so I think I'm trying to give staff the opportunity to do their job, but at the same time, have that trigger before the,
Would you compromise at June 30th?
That's still.
well, that's, but I guess I would say by June 30th. I guess I'm willing to go June 30th, but with the idea that you figure July is usually a pretty hectic
Well, I was
month.
just thinking that should it come back to the council, that first meeting in July, staff is gonna kinda know, because the ad hoc is gonna have to come back every 2 weeks, it's gonna come up, and we're gonna mention how things are going. That's the ad hoc's responsibility. So it's not gonna be a surprise to the council on the first meeting in July. It's not gonna be the first time the council's gonna know what's going on. Every 2 weeks, the council's gonna get an update, how's things going with ad hoc? And then it comes back.
I guess my only
before-
concern, I've seen some of our ad hocs be, by virtue of staff availability, kind of get kicked, and I don't want to unfairly constrain us, so.
The first meeting in July is the fourth Wednesday of July. There's
because-
only one
yeah.
meeting in July,
Yeah,
so
that's
you're into
really late.
August already.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking June might be more appropriate.
June 15th?
The
The first or second
Second
meeting in
meeting in
June,
July.
put it
Why
down.
don't we say
By the second meeting in June.
can I suggest, yeah, well, I would still like to say the first meeting in June, because then.
I'd say,
yeah.
I guess my thing is, my motion is the second meeting in June.
Second meeting in June.
I just want to give staff and us an opportunity to have that dialogue and also to be fair.
And
Tell us.
meanwhile, the ad hoc will be reporting to the council. If it looks like we hit a brick wall way before then, we will know it.
Yeah.
Or if we're making lots of progress, we'll know that too.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's
How
gonna-
many meetings are supposed to happen?
It's really going to be up to the ad hoc committee to schedule that, but you can be assured that if you give us your contact information, you will know when those meetings are. It is also possible for ad hoc committees to have a closed meeting where they just, maybe the two council members and our attorney and our city
And
manager meet.
Anybody else they need to bring.
But,
in to ask
but
questions.
the intention, obviously, is we want to open this up to get involvement from the community that's affected by it. And I have closed the.
No, I just had a question. So we, in order to get the letters about the meetings, how do we get those letters that telling us when those meetings are? Is my question.
Would they just give that information to Kathy, or how do they do that?
Well, you know, from my perspective, it would be great if the tenants themselves would select a person or two that we could communicate directly with, that would be responsible for ensuring that it gets out to all of the tenants.
Is that acceptable to the tenants groups?
The reason for that is that way we will rely on the tenants to communicate amongst themselves, and we won't be missing anybody.
There are also these other mobile home parks that are potentially affected too.
Right.
So I think people that want to be informed of it should be able to get on the list. And if it's just an email, you know, we're not going to be able to address, you know, mail and make phone calls, but we can certainly put an email list together, I think, that's reasonable. So
So
I-
if you're not on that email list, then you don't get the information.
Well, if you're at the Willits Mobile Home Park, I'm hoping that the mobile home park residents who are concerned about this will, as Bob is suggesting, have some lines of communication for people that don't have email. But anybody who wants to be on a list for the city, I think we can handle that.
Can you do it through the newspapers and the?
And yes, that too, yeah. And I am also, okay, so I am going to, we have to have a vote on this motion.
Can we have a second? You don't have to.
Yes.
Clarify
Second.
the motion?
Yeah.
Eugene suggested staff's recommendation, and then if no agreement is made by the second meeting in June, the rest of his motion was for a rent stabilization ordinance to be brought back to council by September 1st. Are you taking that last half out?
I think
Yes.
it's going to, yeah, because I want staff to be able to advise us at that point.
Okay, thank you.
That's our trigger up here, and at that point, we should be in a position with staff and our new city manager at that point to figure out what we need to do.
So, discussion I have a will take motion and a place. second.
Yes, there has been a motion and a second.
Point of clarification.
I'm,
Does it mean that the $35 a month that's being asked of these tenants to pay, is that they're gonna be collecting that much for the next 4 months?
no, there's, that, I believe the rent increase is only going to take place in November. So there isn't anything pending other than that I know of anyway. Okay, so we have the motion and the second, and I think we've all discussed it pretty thoroughly. So let's have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Yes, it's my motion.
Stransky.
No.
Ornstein.
Yeah.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Snow.
Yes. All right, thank you all for coming, and let's have a couple minutes of a break time for you to all head to your cars. But if you want to stay, we have a whole agenda ahead of us. All right, that was a lot of fun. It's really great when we have, I appreciate when we have public involvement in our decisions, and of course, when people are directly affected, they're more likely to get involved, but some of the other items on our agenda also affect us all. So for those of you who stayed, thank you. And we're moving on to consent calendar, which is the city council minutes of February 14th and the disbursement journals.
I so move.
I second it.
All right, is there anybody who wants to speak to that item? If not, we have a motion second. Let's just do voice vote. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving on, informational reports, I think they're in our packet. Right to appeal. If persons are dissatisfied with decisions of City Council, they have the right to review that decision by a court. Cities adopted Section 1094.6 of the Code of Civil Procedures, which limits generally to 90 days the time within which decisions can be appealed. Commissions and agencies and authorities. We are now going to adjourn as the City Council and re-adjourn as the Planning Commission. Is that correct? Convene. Okay, we are going to, we are going to convene as the Planning Commission for item 7A, discussion and possible action on the application for a minor subdivision for David and Liv Schwint. And Dusty is going to make this?
Yes.
Okay, Dusty.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council Members, Dusty Dooley, City Planner. This is a request by owners David and Liv Schmidt to subdivide a 12.1 acre parcel to create a 1.4 acre parcel and a 10.7 acre remainder parcel. No proposed uses have been identified, and the land is zone C1. That's our community commercial zoning. Quickly, just to go over your packet, we provided plenty of information for your reading pleasure. You have the agenda summary. You should have the staff report that goes over some of the key issues and has the recommended conditions of approval, along with the resolution should you choose to approve the project, a number of exhibit maps, including the proposed tentative map that was prepared on behalf for the behalf of the applicants. Hopefully you've got the ledger size copy as well to make it a little bit easier to read. You certainly have the initial study that was prepared by staff consistent with CEQA. And then today you should have received a photo of Highway 101 at the property driveway. And we'll take a look at that here in a minute. This property is located at the northern extent of the city limits. It's bordered by Highway 101 to the west, the railroad tracks to the east, state land, Caltrans land to the north, and then the old Quail Meadows campground to the south. The property is relatively flat. It drains to the east to a natural drainage ditch. City and water services will need to be extended to the property. As you can see on the tentative map, they have shown a potential pathway for services. Water would be extended along existing Highway 101 to the proposed Parcel 1. Sewer could be extended from Castile Lane. This property has an easement through the Quail Meadows property to the south. And then services could be extended to the edges of proposed Parcel 1. Access is provided by an existing driveway off of Highway 101. Staff completed environmental review, as I mentioned, consistent with CEQA. And the primary concern that staff had with this application had to do with maybe not the subdivision itself, but potential future development that could occur on the property, and ensuring safe egress to and from the property to support what that future use might be. As discussed in the staff report, there's a number of permitted uses in the C1 zoning that could be established, such as a truck stop, and this would happen without discretionary approval. And staff is concerned, and if you take a look at that photo, if you like, there that shows the location of the driveway at its intersection with 101, there's limited sight distance because of the curvature in the road and the terrain. You do have a speed limit that's either 55 or 45. I know it goes down to 35 there as you get into the city limits past the property. But staff is concerned that the lack of a left turn facility into the property, along with those other situations I mentioned, could result in a significant traffic hazard. Again, if we were to have this is a Caltrans road at this point, but it could be that when development happens, it's a county road, and that's a correction that I need to note. In the staff report, it mentions that this portion of the road could be relinquished to the city as part of the Main Street relinquishment project, but actually, it's the city limits run along the eastern boundary of 101, so it would not be under city control. Rather, it would remain under Caltrans control or possibly the county. But in order to ensure that we did have the ability to require a left turn lane as appropriate to support future development, staff's recommending condition number 12 to mitigate a potentially significant impact to a less than significant level. And what it says is a left turn lane shall be constructed on U.S. Highway 101 to Caltrans standards to facilitate ingress into the property. Work shall be completed in conjunction with future development on the property and prior to final occupancy of any building. Should the section of U.S. Highway 101 be relinquished, and City of Willits should be recommended to go to County of Mendocino, the left turn lane would be subject to specifications as determined. Instead of city, we would have county. You had a question? That's fine.
Reference that a traffic study. Did you require that, or it depends on the use? I mean, it seems like we looked at this property back when I was chief, and there were some possible things that came up, and I think the issue of having a traffic study done would be the only concern I have, so that we can limit our liability should something happen there.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the staff report that it may be that we do require a traffic study to determine the appropriate design for a left turn lane or other related traffic improvements. It's a Caltrans road. We did refer it to them. Their response was that they establish a standard commercial driveway encroachment, but failed to recommend a traffic study be completed. I feel that either if we're going to go with a left turn lane, then there may not be a need to do a traffic study other than to maybe determine the specifications of it. if this had been a city project, we likely would have
So the county,
leaned towards.
would the county have the ability to weigh in though? Or-
Well, it would, if it's their roadway, then yeah, they would. Yeah, and what this condition is essentially saying is you are going to install a left turn lane. Yeah. I've worked with the applicant to come up with this condition. Applicant is here and may have something further to add, but my understanding is they're okay with and recognize the need to establish a left turn at that location to support future development.
And that would not happen until the development is underway. In
Yeah,
other
the
words,
way,
not-
the way it's written, it would be concurrent with development.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ron, did you have a question?
Yeah, to expand on that, I mean, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I'm looking at the map and I'm looking at the picture, and I don't see where you can safely put a left turn lane in because of that blind curve. And what we would need is some other entity taking responsibility for this. If this is going to be a county road or a state road, then they would have to sign off on the thing, and that's got to be something that we are completely, not associated with. That's number one. Number two, I'm looking through here, and I remember, I can't find it right now, but I remember reading that the city has, something like the city has enough water and sewer capacity to handle, future development. And my question is, how do you know? Because you don't know what the future development's going to be. So how can we make that kind of a statement? And why don't we know what the development is being planned?
There's no requirement for the applicant to identify a future use. And so, I mean, it certainly is easier from a planning perspective if you know what the future use is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
The state has weighed in on our water availability. They've looked at our existing needs and where we could go, and it's something like a 20% increase. At the TAC meeting, we had the rest of my colleagues and staff discussing the project, and of the permitted uses, I suppose you don't know for sure, but I don't anticipate a use coming in that would be so substantial that it's going to eat up, a significant
Well,
percentage
what
of
would be
the city water
what would be the
needs.
threshold of significant and not significant? I mean, for example, if you built, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a wood pulp factory that uses a ton of water, for example. Could we support something like that?
I didn't hear what it was, I'm sorry.
Wood pulp factory
A
that
wood pulp,
uses
yeah.
water up the wazoo.
We could, it's not a permitted use, but.
Yeah, aside from that, I'm just
Yeah.
talking about, I'm blue skying here,
Right.
I can think of a large housing development, for example, that has 100 houses,
Yeah.
that's going to use X number of amount of water. Or a commercial truck wash, or,
Right.
things like
Well,
that.
I suppose, any use that comes in, if we don't have the water to support them, the use isn't gonna happen regardless of what conditions we have on the project.
All right,
So it's, I guess it's an assumed statement to say that we have water to serve the property, because you're right, it does depend on the use. If a water park comes in, and again, that's not a permitted use, we'd have
Yeah.
discretion over that, but if we don't have the water to support a really intensive use, then either they're looking for an alternative source of water, or, the project doesn't get to happen.
Okay, I mean,
Whatever projects go there would need to be
Yeah, I
able to
get
be
that.
served
And
by
so,
water and sewer.
I mean, I understand also that if, they're not required to tell you what they're going to do there. However, it seems to me it would be in the best interest of the developer to let you know, so he doesn't get disappointed 6 months or a year from now when you say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And I understand also that a lot of times you don't want to put out there what you're planning because competition might come in and, usurp it, or, I mean, I get all that. But somehow we need to, you should be able to ask questions and they can blink or not, once or twice to let you know if you're on, you know what I mean? It seems like it's an integral part of approving this whole thing to know what are you going to do with it.
Yeah.
Are these the developers?
These are the subdividers.
The subdividers. So if we were to ask them to
I would agree with you, Ron. That's what's missing out of this, and I'm curious what they're intending to use for the property, what impact it's gonna have on our water as well.
So, okay, at this point, we're asking questions of Dusty regarding his staff report.
Larry had a question.
Larry has a question, and you do too, Jerry?
Yes, I went down and looked at this today, and I was just interested in how down it went. And from the picture, you can tell a little bit, but it's quite steep. And so it's all in the floodplain, and it's okay, you don't have a problem with flood at all? On both of them?
Yeah, if you look at attachment D of the staff report, it has the floodplain map. And according to FEMA and how they've mapped it, none of the properties within the floodplain.
So,
although it certainly is like I think the botanist that reviewed the site called it like a wet meadow grasslands type setting. So Larry's correct in that it's a low-lying property that does appear to have ponding and wet.
Yeah, it's going to get
wet meadow
pretty wet at the
conditions,
bottom.
right.
Back up against the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it is not in the floodplain, so it wouldn't be subject to
Yeah, it's
floodplain
completely out of the
development
flood zone.
restrictions.
So anyhow, that was my question, and then the water ties in to, and they furnish the water from where it is now up to the property?
The owner is responsible
sewer.
for extending the services to the property.
And if it ties in to some of the other properties, which has to do nothing with this, but there's another property down here that is in works also.
Correct.
So have they talked to any of this other person to see what's happening there? I mean, I know they maybe can't answer that, but I'm just saying that there's just a lot of things that, I mean, I'm for this, and don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of out there that nobody knows, I guess. Is that right?
There, and staff has voiced this to this applicant, the applicant to the property to the south, and then also the owner of the property between them, where the storage units are. And there is a recognition that there may be an opportunity for the owners to get together and to work on a comprehensive design that would be to the benefit of all of them by price and design, etc.
Okay.
But certainly we can't force that.
Jerry?
Thank you.
Jerry?
I just wanted to say, just even though we speculated as to what they may or may want to do, all we're dealing with today is the zoning change.
Yes.
Not a zoning change, just a subdivision.
Sorry, approving the subdivision. And ultimately, whether they want to put in a truck stop or a flying saucer landing pad, they got to go back to you and get approval for those projects.
To some extent. Now, again, one of the points I was trying to make is you have permitted uses in the zoning, such as a truck stop, where we would certainly likely run them through the site development process and ensure that we have adequate water and sewer and parking, et cetera. But in that point, we're just providing standards.
Yeah.
And the only situation that I saw as being a real potential issue was the ingress egress into the property. So you have a truck stop, you have multiple semis, let's say, trying to make a left turn and stacking up. Caltrans didn't feel, anyways. So just sort of wanted to maintain the ability for that left turn requirement regardless of not knowing what that development was going to be. Discretionary permits like a gas station would be subject to a use permit and would come back before the council with another environmental review and the ability to put additional mitigation measures, conditions of approval on the project.
Okay. Is that did you complete your staff report?
Sure.
Okay. So, and we've had some questions already. So I'm opening the public hearing, and if anybody here would like to speak to us regarding this application for subdivision, do you want to?
somebody's got some specific questions.
Well, you heard a couple questions here, but
Yeah, I
I
have
don't
a
know.
specific
I can
question.
tell you one thing.
Well, look, can you- You have to come up to, I'm sorry. And then state your name, please.
We've spoken to Caltrans on a number of occasions, and they've indicated that a left-hand turn lane will be required no matter what the development is there. So that's a foregone conclusion. You're going to have that. Any use that's applied for there virtually, they're going to have to come back to the council, to the planning commission, and to the planning director, and find out what the new conditions are, et cetera, et cetera. You'll have another bite at every apple. This is strictly a subdivision right now. Nothing is cast in stone other than that we've got a property that we can dispose of to the proper parties who will then develop it appropriately with the city.
Okay. Dusty's indicated that there are some uses that don't require a conditional use permit in your C1 zoning. So those wouldn't come back to the council, but they would go to the staff to meet certain standards. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can only imagine uses there that will bring them back here.
Okay, well, there are others that require conditional use permit. And so, Ron, do you have?
Yeah, so since you did ask if we had any questions, I'd like to redirect my question to you. What is your plan for the property?
Well, my plan is to sell it to a developer who's probably going to put in a gas station or a convenience store or something along those lines.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, that's pretty good. Thank you.
All right. And does anyone else want to address us on this item? If not, the public hearing is closed. And I will entertain.
I'll make a motion to accept staff's recommendations and approve a resolution of our planning commission as presented to council.
I second it.
A quick point of clarification to note my error in condition number 12. I'd recommend that we strike City of Willits from the last sentence to be replaced with County of Mendocino, as well as the word city, and replace it with county, to recognize that the portion of 101 to be relinquished would not go to the city, it would rather go to the county.
Okay.
And that's only if the relinquishment has already happened.
Basically, it's just trying to recognize that if the development happened at a time when the road didn't belong to Caltrans, that we'd be working with the county standards to establish that left turn lane.
Okay. So we have a motion.
Second.
Yes, and a second. So any other discussion or questions from?
Yeah, I would just like to point out that if this is passed and you sign the resolution, you may want to change the title of the person who's signing this.
Oh.
The mayor of the city council is not going to sign this. It's going to be the chairman of the planning commission.
Okay. Who is the same person? Okay. Okay, so let's have a voice vote. I mean, a roll call.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Orenstein?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Strong?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Schwinn.
So
Thank you.
thank you. So we're closing the meeting, whatever. We are.
Planning Commission.
Yeah, the Planning Commission, and reconvening as the City Council again. And we are going to verbal reports from our interim city manager, Mr. Carlton.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, just a couple of quick things. Just want to remind you that on March 5th, Monday night at 6 o'clock, the county is going to be holding a meeting here at the community center regarding the secondary access for brook trails. It's probably something that is very important to the community. The other I was just going to mention is that I'm in my final 2 weeks. The next council meeting will be the last one. I'm officially sitting as city manager, and during this part of the agenda, I'm going to provide you with my out-the-door recommendations, if you will.
We have really appreciated your services here.
Thank you.
You say you're going to be at the next council meeting?
Yes.
And that's the day before
Stephanie
starts?
Starts, yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if she's here for that.
I would
Probably.
certainly hope so.
But, yeah, we'll have more to say on March 14th. All right, well, that was a short report. Department recommendations. Administration, city clerk.
Just a couple quick things. Form 700s are still needed, there's a couple that I haven't received yet. You can file them electronically, or you can bring them into the office to me.
If we do that, Kathy, do you still want a copy, or will you get it automatically when we do that?
If you do it,
I do not get it automatically.
So you'd want a copy then?
Please. Oh, I'm sorry. I will be out of the office all next week.
Ooh.
So,
Wow.
if you need anything, hang on to it.
Or find
Please.
someone else. Okay. Finance, would that be you, Sylvia? Want to give us a report?
Yeah, let me introduce
okay.
Celia if I could.
Sure, I just realized that we
yes.
have a whole item there.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it's the mid-year report. Staff is pleased to be able to present it to you. It's a little bit later than we would like, but it is still timely. Just as a reminder, when you adopted your budget back in June, that budget was made on a series of assumptions, and those assumptions were based on the best information we had at the time. As you'll see in the presentation from Celia Peterson, things in the general fund are improving, and we're certainly glad about that. So with that, I'll ask Celia to take you through the report.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm bringing you the attached or the mid-year financial report to give you an update and a summary.
I'm sorry, Sheila, I just want to interrupt. If we need this to be on record, she doesn't have a microphone there?
Yes, she does.
Oh, she does, oh, okay.
Is it gonna
I didn't see
work?
it. I didn't see it.
It'll pick up.
Okay, great, thank you. I didn't see it. Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
So I'm going to bring you an update and a summary of general and enterprise fund revenues and expenditures. I'm taking it as of January 31st, since this report is coming so late. I did have actual information through the end of January to work with, so I'm giving you an update till then. I've included some exhibits with the report that give you detail as to what amendments have been made to date and proposed. Our general fund revenues, at this point in time through January 31st, are 55% of the total budgeted amount. As revenues often lag behind by 1 to 2 months, the 55% is representative of a month or two earlier. In particular, with the general fund revenues, we're seeing some positive trends in our sales tax and property taxes and room occupancy tax. Our general fund expenditures up to this point are 57% of budget. With the proposed budget amendments and ones that have already been approved, our expenditure budget will increase to $4.757 million with an increased variance of $519,764. The general fund to date that have been approved by council and new amendment requests represents an increase of $764,000 in revenues and interfund transfers. It includes some detailed transfers, operating transfers, increases in sales tax, new revenues for the medical cannabis permit program. The expenditure increases of $553,000.
Where are you looking right now?
I'm reading from here, and I'm looking at the budget amendments that are approved up
Gotcha.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is the schedule of general fund amendments. So expenditure increases of $553,000. include, again, the approved appropriations to support the medical cannabis permit program, some funding for the ADA parking lot rehabilitation, additional requests of $113,000 for required ADA modifications and accessible restroom installation at City Hall. Some funding for the tennis courts resurfacing project and funding to fund improvements to the park's water fill station and irrigation installation in Snyder Park. With these total general fund amendments, it results in a net decrease of $203,143 in the budget deficit, which brings the estimated budget deficit down from $389,747 to $186,604 for the fiscal year 17-18. So the original projected operating deficit was at 389, and now it's gone down with these proposed adjustments. The estimated beginning general fund balance, well, it has increased by that amount, $106,774, which raised the projected ending balance from last fiscal year from 1.469 million to 1.779, and that meets the general fund reserve requirements at 37.5% of operating expenditures. Moving on, one of the proposals that is being submitted for your consideration is to increase our budgeted sales tax revenues in the budget by $305,000. Sales tax revenue is our biggest general fund revenue stream. At the time the budget was prepared, there were unknowns about the impact of sales tax revenues due to the Order 1 bypass that was put in. According to analysis provided by Muni Services of our sales tax cash receipts to date, the trend for our sales tax revenues is averaging a decrease of 4% rather than the 16% originally budgeted. So with this mid-year budget amendment summary, we're proposing to increase those budgeted revenues to help reduce the operational deficit that was presented with the initial budget, and then also to help fund some of these one-time expenditures that have been submitted for approval. Moving on to the enterprise funds.
Hold on, before you go on that, I'm looking through this, and I was looking through here, and I'm not finding it. I thought I saw somewhere the summary of the reserve fund of the deficit. And I thought I read that the deficit, instead of being almost $400,000, is like less than $100,000.
And that was corrected in your corrected agenda summary. So the budget deficit originally projected was $389,000. And with these revisions,
okay.
the deficit is gone down to $186,600.
Okay.
So yes, you did see that, but that was before I made the correction.
Okay. So this is as of January 31st?
Correct.
And are all of the numbers up to January 31st in and accounted for in here?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, we're looking at February and onward that could modify it to some degree.
Yes, it could.
Okay.
And with sales tax in particular, revenues lag 2 months behind. So.
So it's an estimate?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Moving on to the enterprise and special revenue funds. The water and sewer rate increases that were adopted by council last year, those revenues were not put in the original proposed budget because they had not been approved at the time. So revenues are coming in approximately 20% above the initial budget estimates, which is not proposed changing at this time, but the proposed approved and newly requested amendments represented $375,000 increase in net cost for many projects which are detailed in this exhibit in the mid-year report, and increased revenues will support the increased utility system costs and maintain necessary fund balances to meet our debt covenant requirements. As of this review, expenditures appear to be on track with budget, and no amendments to revenue projections are requested. The attachment here report and amendment requests have been prepared with the best available data at this time, and further budget updates and any necessary amendment requests will be provided to council prior to fiscal year end. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Happy?
Veronica,
Yeah,
you have some-
yeah. Key to this whole thing, of course, is the audit. And how are we on the audit? I understand that we're like 6 months behind on having it done. Where are we now?
Typically, the city would have their audit report finalized in December.
Okay.
December?
Yes.
Of the end of the fiscal year. And at this point, we are scheduling our site visit next week, March 5th. The auditors will be here. They're doing their preliminary audit interview and sampling. When they get here, we will ask for a commitment as to when we can get them back and a draft audit. Our hope is to have a finalized audit by the end of April. That's our hope. And we will know more next week after the auditors have concluded their field work.
So typically, the audit is done 6 months after the adoption of the new fiscal year's budget.
Of
December.
The previous year.
Yeah. And it looks like we're going to be later than that. Are there any penalties or consequences for such a late audit?
You know, Celia, as all I can say is that we are required to furnish those audit reports as part of our conditions for some of the loans that we have, especially in the sewer treatment plant. And it would really begin getting problematic, I would think, if it were to extend into the next fiscal year. They're going to want to see those reports, obviously, as soon as possible. I don't think there will be any direct sanctions, but obviously, if we were able to get that draft report done before the end of the fiscal year, we'd be able to avoid that. I think if you go longer than that, some of the covenants in the loan agreements we have with the various financing institutions would be problematic. But if we can get that done within the next couple of months, we'll most likely be okay.
So it's not like we're going to be fined or go to jail or
No.
anything like that. It's mostly with our lending institutions.
Right.
And that always gives us, you know, with history and everything, we can sort of negotiate something.
The real important, from my perspective, in getting that audit done in a timely fashion is because it verifies your year-end figures.
Yeah.
And without that, you can't, Celia's indicated that it appears to us right now, based on the information that we have, that actually our starting position, or your starting position, was better than originally anticipated.
Yeah.
And we have gotten a lot closer to knowing that because of the work that the RGS has been done in preparation of the audit. But I will also say that with a caveat, until that audit is done, it's not confirmed.
Right. Okay.
So I'll add to that, that I've been in discussion with the agencies we report to at the state and with the company that we have the sewer loans with. They would have wanted the audited financials a while ago, but I have let them all know and have given them preliminary year-end reports that in the meantime they're satisfied with the understanding as soon as the audit is done.
Yeah, I mean,
with the audited financials.
we've been dealing with them for years, and, you know, it's not like they don't know
Yeah.
that we're good for the money.
And I've been in conversation with them, so.
Good, good.
So, and that completes your report?
That does complete my report.
And is there anybody here in the public who would like to speak to this? And if not, are there any other questions from council members?
We have to make a motion or something?
Yeah, I was going to ask for a question first and then a motion. Okay, so, Terry?
I'll move staff's recommendations and approve the budget amendments as presented by Celia.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. And no discussion. So I think we need a roll call vote on this too, just for the record.
Yes, Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Strasky?
Yes.
Lawrence?
Yep.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Stroh?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Good work. So a lot to do. Okay, so that was our finance department. Human resources is not here. Is there anything on that?
No, the only thing I can comment is we are getting the applications in for the planning compliance position, and that'll close next month.
All right, legal. Nothing? Okay. Public safety, Scott. You've been patiently sitting through this meeting.
I'm supposed to be here anyway. I'm Scott Warnock, Chief of Police. Just a few things. I can't see. Last council meeting, one of the citizens complained about the large trucks going down Franklin. So John Sherman and I looked into some of the aspects of it. There's a municipal code that prevents any vehicle over 12,000 pounds from, other than doing deliveries, that's allowed by the vehicle code, to use the street. We also discovered that it wasn't properly signed for us to enforce it. So the Public Works assisted us and got the proper signage up yesterday or the day before, and we're now enforcing that provision of the municipal code. So, she said we wouldn't do anything. So, one of the big things that I've been working on is the Nixle system. It's also called Everbridge. It's a system that the county uses, the Ukiah Police Department use, and every public safety agency in Sonoma County use. It's a system where persons can sign up and get notifications, either text or phone calls. In addition to that, I also am signing us up to get reverse 911 calls when there's an emergency. That will be automatic. The texts and the other phone calls, people have to sign up to receive those calls. And there's different levels that they can sign up for. They can sign up for just emergencies, or they can sign up for other things such as missing children, dangerous criminals, fires when the systems work, road closures. Our city yard can contact us, and we'll be able to notify people where there's road work going on and things like that. Accidents affecting the traffic, down trees, severe weather, things like that. So we hope to have that up and running within a couple weeks. The cost is $4,500 per year. It's actually $4,000 per year. It was an extra $1,000 for the reverse 911. So just the text and phone call system that people sign up for is $3,000. It's an additional $1,000 for the reverse 911, and it's for the first year. It's $500 for setup, for training the staff, installing software, etc. And I'm paying for that through asset forfeiture. I thought that was an appropriate use of it. So again, hoping to start that up in the next couple of weeks. We've needed it lately.
Yes. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
I know that we had talked and you had said that now that you're back that you might be able to use, for example, the police department's Facebook page with the weather conditions the way they are for Thursday and Friday. Would you, for example, be using the Facebook page to notify people of road closures or conditions?
Yes.
And such?
Yes, and I put an entry for the weather today.
Good.
I saw
already.
it. I saw it.
Yes, using that a lot more.
Good, good. Thank you.
And as you may have seen for the school situation,
Yes.
all the accidents on Sherwood Road,
Yes.
we've been using that quite a bit for that. They're also, the company that is Nixle or Everbridge, they are going to assist us with marketing this so that people will know how to sign up for it. You know, it'll be on our Facebook page, and hope to send flyers out with the water bill, things like that, and advertising.
I like that, because the more proactive the city can be and the police department can be with disseminating information, the fewer opportunities people will have to give the wrong information to their friends and neighbors.
Yes, and their council people.
Yes.
All right.
I have another question. You done? There used to be, and there still might be, a service at the police department for collecting unused medication. Do we still have that?
We do.
Yes, it's a red bin. You have to remove them from your pill bottles, put them in a plastic bag, and
It's a service of MSWA.
Okay, where is the bin located?
it's in the police department's lobby.
You
Okay.
can't miss it when you go in the front
It's the
door.
big red one.
Good.
It says no sharps. It was
No
actually,
sharps, right.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Right.
Just didn't know.
Won't the hospital take the sharps?
I don't know. I think MSWA will, I think they did have
Yeah.
a program, but you had to have it in a approved container.
Trying to get the drugstores to take them back.
Are you done with your report, or do you have?
I am done with my report. I'm just waiting for more questions.
Okay, and we don't have any more questions that I can see, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Oh,
I
you got
have
a
one more question. I know that,
Sound like Columbo.
I know, sorry. Could you just address, I know that there was a planned lockdown of schools in, prior to the recent situation that we had with the school district. And I know that there's many people out there in the community are wanting to know a little bit more about the relationship between the school district and the police department, what you have planned for drills specifically, or any kind of preparedness training. Is there anything upcoming that
I
the
can share.
community should know?
There's
That you-
nothing I can share at this time.
Okay, when there is, will you share it?
If I can, yes.
Thank you.
If it would be appropriate.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Community development. I know that our code enforcement officer is not feeling well, but Dusty is here. So,
Just keep it very brief. The recruitment for the assistant planner seems to be going well. Looks like we have a prospective applicant as close as Willits and as far away as Florida. So, and that closes on March 22nd. I'm glad that's going well. We're up to 10 cannabis activity permits now, with many scheduled for appointments to submit further applications. We received 5 current planning applications beyond cannabis permits just in the last month. So whoever we do hire, whoever's lucky enough to come work for the wonderful city of Willits, we'll have plenty for them to do. And I'll certainly be able to maintain enough to keep myself busy too, and hopefully still have some job security if you still like to keep me around. Just very quickly, you have the monthly update from our community development specialist that just got handed out to you. Happy to answer any questions, provide any clarification there, but I continue to be happy with Mr. Jim Robbins' efforts and successes so far, and hopefully many more to come. Let's see here, just very briefly, the regional housing needs assessment from the state, at least Mendocino County's portions, we're anticipating that soon. Planners representing each of the jurisdictions in the county got together just to sort of start talking about strategies for allocating those numbers. Again, these are the state's essentially providing a number to the county, to MCOG, that thing gets further broken up, and this is basically our share of helping meet California's growth in housing needs, and it's broken into categories from very low income to above moderate. We're expecting relatively low numbers similar to last year, so I don't anticipate having to do any rezones within the city to identify any more housing opportunities. So that is good news. In years past, you've received high numbers, and then jurisdictions are scrambling to find additional housing opportunities, which can be an interesting process sometimes. Yeah, that's basically what I had to share with you.
When you said there were 10 permits have already gone through your...
We've received 10 permits. We've knocked out the first wave of them. Again, as I reported in the past, and it's still unfortunately the same story, where the city's done their due diligence in getting folks through the permit process. We haven't had a business actually commence yet, and the reason is there's been significant need to upgrade the buildings to meet occupancy and ADA requirements.
And are there 5 additional ones that are sort of coming into the pipeline? Is that?
There's a few that just started the project referral process, and a couple that just came in that we need to get referred out. So, so we're in a few different stages.
Any other questions for Dusty?
Yeah.
Yes.
Madge held an event at Well on Sunday, and I was impressed by the number of people that were concerned about zoning in our community, and we assured them that it was a topic of future discussion at Revive Ed. There seems to be quite a bit of interest in the community being involved and hearing what's happening with that, so I just want to make sure that when we do put it on the agenda, that maybe we have an opportunity to really put it out there to the community that that's what we're discussing. Sometimes those agendas come not very long before the meeting, and that there's more interest than I expected.
Yeah, and Revive Ed is really interesting meetings to attend. It seems like we have some very pertinent issues that affect the community that happen at that level of a committee, and I would encourage folks to contact myself or Kathy Moorhead, our city clerk, and you can get on a listserv so that you're emailed that agenda and any information we can provide with that. And yeah, it's always a scramble to try to get an agenda, and it does not always happen as soon as staff would like either.
I think with the relinquishment of Main Street, there is a renewed interest by community members to participate in Revive Ed.
Yeah.
They're looking for opportunities to get involved. And so the sooner we can get out our agenda and the more we can publicize what we're doing at Revive Ed, I think is really important right now.
Right on, I agree. And yeah, and then again, we did have, we had some other topics that took up most of the time for Revive Ed, but we did briefly sort of touch on the topic of, how zone changes could, potentially benefit the community. And again, I think that comprehensive review of not only our zoning code, but the actual zoning designations within the city really occur as part of a general plan amendment general plan update. And so, I'd be curious to find out what the specific zoning issues were that were brought up at that meeting. Unfortunately, I was at a family reunion, unable to attend, but I have to say that I could tell it was well attended just by the number of people that have contacted me following up on that meeting. So I commend our mayor for helping establish that meeting. Yeah.
Oh.
Excuse me, go ahead.
And then it's your turn. When we, especially when we go into like the priority and goal setting that we're going to be doing, but it seems to me that Revite Ed is a pretty big umbrella of issues, and especially if we're going to move towards a general plan, there's just so many. It's like your Willits Tourism Board, you're having like subcommittees work on different things that we might have to look at doing that, so that things don't only have to come to the whole committee and people can specialize in getting specific things done and then brought back to the city council. So, yeah, okay, but down the road. Yes, Larry?
Yeah, the next Revite Ed meeting is March what?
Is March 8th, yeah. And I would say that's really focused on Caltrans and the Main Street relinquishment project.
And what time?
3:30.
3:30. And I've been telling everybody up and down the street to come and put their 2 cents in. So
yeah,
that's the only way they're going to find out, because there has been very little information about what's happening to the average person on the street.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm aware of the anxiousness that came out quite clear at our last Revite Ed meeting, and actually that's a good thing, because what's happening is you have a public, many folks that are highly participated in our charrette and in the process of crafting that award-winning Main Street plan that the council unanimously approved, and I support the community in keeping us on task to follow through with that plan. So,
but just another point on that, and then Jerry, that is that this particular one, March 8th, is going to really focus on the signage issues, right?
That was what we
no,
discussed.
Is that what it's?
We said we were tackling signage.
Okay, I had it in my mind, in my notes, that it was all about Caltrans, the relinquishment project, and providing updates on that.
Well, it would be good to clarify that, because we don't want...
So signage as far as...
My understanding that it was signage as it pertains to the relinquishment in Caltrans, but more specifically signage in the greater vision.
Okay, so, okay.
That was my understanding. What did you think, Jerry?
I thought so too, but I also, come to think of it, it would be great, I don't know if it's such short notice, to try and see if the Caltrans public information person could maybe, if not show up, if not invite them, but if not provide us something. We could talk to them.
If I could, Madam Mayor, I remember, if I'm not mistaken, we purposely, or the meeting was set for March 8th, so that, tomorrow, the subcommittee is going to meet with Caltrans, and we'd be able to relate some of that information from the Caltrans meeting to Revite Ed.
So I think we need to be clear about what's on that agenda, so that people don't all show up and then sit through a conversation about the billboard and feel disappointed that we...
So it doesn't sound like it's the billboard, it sounds like it's additional highway signage that Caltrans could potentially provide, as well as wayward signing and other types of signage within the city that we ultimately would be responsible for installing.
That was my understanding.
Yeah, and I'm glad that clarification was provided. So we'll get both of those items on the agenda for March 8th, and I should say it's probably pending weather. I don't know if there's a situation where that meeting doesn't happen tomorrow.
If we could set up the room to be friendly to those people that might come in, so that if you're walking in, and you know how sometimes we've already got a full table, because I do believe they were going to have a large group that's going to come to this meeting, probably at least double what we've had in the past. So just a little bit of preparation so that they feel welcome. Yeah.
Okay.
And to make sure that everybody also knows.
I'm looking at Kathy like, I'm not
I guess it'll be up to Dusty and myself.
And I'll be calling in at that meeting, or you'll be calling me,
Yes.
either one. I'll be out of the area, but I won't be present.
And people should also know that there will definitely be some bigger public meetings at which Caltrans is going to explain the whole process of what they're doing with the relinquishment project.
yeah, and hopefully we'll have maybe some updates on when that community meeting might happen
Exactly.
with Caltrans.
Okay. Okay, so we actually already have the Revite Ed committee report, but going on, I think public work.
Well, I think, yes, we have one more item on the agenda, Madam Mayor.
Well, I've got 9C is what we just had, and then we're doing Public Works. Is there any report on Public Works? And then we do
No.
Is there something else that you wanted to put in right now, or are we
No,
gonna go
we'll
into-
wait.
Okay, so let's keep them short, please, but City Council and committee reports. League of Cities.
Hasn't met, we'll be meeting March 9th in Cloverdale. I know, Bob, I tried to send it out, my email was jammed, but I'm glad you sent out the stuff from Sarah Rouse.
Right.
And there are some things, and I knew I wasn't gonna make it for this meeting, but you might wanna look at that over because it won't, I'm not sure we'll have an opportunity before that meeting, but I'm sure that there'll be time to bring forward some resolutions and support after that meeting. So, that I could present, because the way it's set up, I'll be able to report out that we distributed to council, but we'll have to come back, and maybe I'll be able to refine that.
So one item that I mentioned to Bob before, but maybe you can bring it up at League of Cities, is that ADA compliance at the federal level has, there's legislation being proposed and a lot of lobbying.
And by the way, that's come up before at our meeting where we brought up, folks making the rounds and hitting cities has come up.
Yeah, but so there is proposed legislation.
Yes.
That might actually address some of the issues that all of these cities have had with
Yes.
no time to make the improvements and all that.
It is called HR 620, and it would be worth bringing up, I think, Madam Mayor, at that meeting in Cloverdale. And we also will have a couple of resolutions that they're seeking approval for. We'll have those on our next agenda here.
Thank you.
Okay, good. MCOG.
MCOG will not meet in the month of March, so we're not going to have anything for a month.
And EDFC will not meet in the month of March either. This MSWA is meeting, and I don't have the date in front of me, but we are meeting later, early in March.
I believe it's next Thursday, but it's the 8th.
Yeah, I don't have the date in front of me, and I got all sorts of pieces of paper. But, yeah, we are meeting, we meet right here at 10 in the morning, and I know, I think it is March 8th. Pretty sure it's March 8th. Okay. MTA.
MTA met today, and we discussed unmet needs for this year. And again, I informed the board that we have an unmet need with transportation to the Brook Trails community, as well as we need to look at what opportunities we have to provide, not necessarily Willits, but to service from Willits to Laytonville, to Covelo. Want to look at that. Also discussed, there is a bus stop in front of JD Red House, and wanting our MTA manager to have the opportunity to be part of the Caltrans discussion to make sure that that bus stop has been built into the plan. MTA is concerned about whether or not it's going to be ADA accessible and some other things. So I talked to Bob about wanting to make sure that before we get any further down the road, they're included in the conversation. And they're putting MTA purchased 3 brand new buses, which are going out and going already. And then the exciting news was that today we approved a plan. It's a conditional plan based on funding that will hopefully come from the transportation tax, and it'll go before you, Larry, at MCOG, but MTA is working towards getting a full electric vehicle bus. It would be the first electric bus for public transportation to be operated in Mendocino County. So that's pretty exciting. It's a 3-year plan to pay for it, but I'm glad to see us being eco-friendly.
Before you get off of MTA, you may not be aware that last year, whenever we were doing the Main Street revitalization charrettes, the owner of JD Red House came to one of the meetings, maybe it was a council meeting, and she complained vociferously about having the bus stop right there by her front door.
Interesting.
Because she gets a lot of transients that sit on the bench and it's just a bad situation. So before you enhance that bus stop, I think you ought to.
That's really important, and that was a discussion that we had. Carla Meyer is the general manager for MTA, and she's only been serving on the MTA board for about 15 months, and so she wasn't part.
Sure,
she wouldn't have had that information. So I'll definitely relay that to her, and it'll be even more important for her to be included in those conversations with Caltrans.
Because she came to the council, and it would be like if we didn't, listen to her, we're going to hear about it later.
I appreciate you sharing that information, because we'll look into that.
LAFCO.
We'll meet on Monday.
On Monday, okay. We have had the finance report from the finance director. Do we have any?
Tomorrow, actually, we have a finance committee meeting, if you recall.
I recall. Yes.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Oops, I lost my place. Water, wastewater.
Hasn't met since the last meeting.
Oh my goodness. We have heard quite a bit about the Revi Ed committee. Is there anything further that we should know about Revi Ed? If not, we've already talked about it. The Caltrans Ad Hoc Committee will be meeting tomorrow.
Right.
Before the finance, I think it is. The JPA feasibility study has not met. Little Lake Fire District.
Met yesterday. And basically, it was a scoping meeting with the fire chief and some of his board members, and Jerry and Bob were there as well. And we have an agreement, the city has an agreement with the fire district that goes back about 30 years, and it's time to revisit it. And there's some special concerns that the fire department has to deal with now. So we asked him to, make a list of those concerns. I mean, everything boils down to money. He needs more manpower to do mostly the fire marshal's work. So we asked him to prepare a budget. How much money are we talking about? And then we can figure out how to make it happen. And he's also, this is Chris Wilkes, the fire chief, is also going to dig up agreements between cities and fire districts that are similar to what we have here, so we can use as a starting point to rewrite the thing. So it's ongoing, but it's I think we got off to a good start.
Yeah, and we gave him an update. Celia provided some numbers regarding some Prop 172 monies that we got in the interest of disclosing what we get in that arena. So,
okay.
Madam Mayor, before you leave the ad hoc committees, one of the things that didn't get done was appointing an ad hoc committee for mobile home.
For mobile homes. I would like to appoint Sabrina Rodriguez and Jerry Gonzalez. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay. And now we're on to other community boards and committees. Museum Advisory Board.
Museum Advisory Board meets Monday, March 12th at 10 a.m. In the room in the back of the museum. And I would encourage and invite all community members to attend. There's been a lot going on with changes at the museum, and as a result, I have had quite a bit of feedback from the community about the museum, both from people who live in the Willits community, but also from outlying areas. So it's good to get some feedback on their concerns and to have an opportunity to address them.
And maybe it could fit somewhere else on the agenda, but there is going to be a guided tour of the Willits Then and Now exhibit, and followed by a public forum on Willits Then, Now, and Future. And I'm trying to remember the date of that.
It is going to be March, is it 17th or the 18th, whichever one of those. It's on the weekend. It's that weekend. I can't tell you the specific date, but I know that it's St. Patrick's Day weekend.
Okay, and it'll be after our next meeting, but still, it's good for people to know about that, because I think it's, for one thing, it's a great exhibit for people to go and get a guided tour of it, and then also the discussion afterwards, and it's free admission to those.
It is. It's actually on that Sunday, and it's at approximately 4 or 5 in the evening.
The tour is at 3:30 and the public forum at 4:30, something like that. Okay, moving on. Willits Tourism Board.
Tourism Board, I'm excited to bring back some project ideas that we're moving forward with. And we're looking for a signature event that we could add to Willits. And I was online and I was looking at, because I was thinking about events that we already have where there's lots of people in town. And for example, we have all kinds of people here the whole week for the 4th of July festivities. And so I talked to MTA today and I said, you know, what would be the possibility of us using the trolley here in Willits during that to move people about? 'Cause you know, like when we have the barbecue, people are walking about, and we've got the hometown celebration and lots of other wonderful things coming out. Well, anyway, I talked about it, and it sounds like something that's very viable. So we'll continue to talk with MTA about that. We have a website that we're in the process of building, the Visit Willits website, the calendar with the Chamber of Commerce, and the calendar on our website will melt together so that we want one place where you can go and post your event, and so no more will you wonder if there are 2 or 3 other events on the same day. We're also have somebody that's going to lead up heading a project where we would be putting together a Visit Willits magazine and a brochure. We have somebody who is going to start putting together some running activities. Like, for example, we have one person that's really enthusiastic about having a venue in Willits where we would have, for example, a half marathon. We have all this beautiful country side out here. It's beautiful, so we're in an ideal location for that. We have some biking things that are going on, so expanding on that. There's some wonderful clubs out of Ukiah. So we're trying to pull that over into Willits. Willits has lots of gems in our community that people don't know about, so starting to document that. We want to promote Willits 101. So we would go to business owners and people who work at the front desk and say, hey, come to this free training, and at this training we're going to tell you all the things that you could find and do in Willits, so that when someone stops at the gas station, the person who's at the front desk knows just where to send them in Willits.
The only comment is don't call it 101 because
Well,
it's confusing.
No,
It
but
sounds like the highway.
basically, and everything you need to know.
Yeah.
So we're putting together, like, who would our partners be? What budget do we need? What time frame? What goals do we want to achieve in this period of time? And which projects would carry over a larger period of time? We have one person on our board that wants to kind of spearhead some of those projects for signage. And so we want to partner with the Revive Ed and ultimately the city to actually say, we'll take the lead on getting this project done, which I think Revive Ed, yeah, Revive Ed, I think that might be a good thing, where the Revive Ed sets the vision and the council has the vision, but maybe somebody else goes and actually pulls up their sleeve and gets the work done. So excited about that. We're looking at venues that we could possibly create in the area. And just in stating that, there's been so much feedback from the community. Even going to Madge's event at Well, there were people that came up to me afterwards that said, I have this wonderful, beautiful piece of land that I didn't even know existed in the community, and they want to hold something really special. So just really working hard to create partnerships. And we met 2 weeks ago, Chamber, Allie, and myself and Madge met with
Richard
Cooper from Visit Mendocino, and trying to build a stronger partner with them. They discussed the possibility of promoting, well, not the possibility, they will promote Willits more, and we will give them the information that they need so that that can happen. And they're going to get back to us, and we'll have access to a lot of their data, which is really important. They've spent a lot of money and worked hard to get data as to where visitors could potentially come from. I know there's a lot of discussion about people getting off the bypass that are already driving down the road, but the data doesn't really support that's where tourism's coming from. We really need to be reaching out to the Bay Area and to the Sacramento Valley and offering an experience, not so much a get off and stop, but more of an experience in our community. So that's where the tourism board is focused on, is on how can we get people to come into Willits for an experience, and how can we enhance the daily experience that we all have in our community so that we can all enjoy the things we love. I'm excited about it, in case you haven't.
Did you see the article of Ukiah in the Sunset magazine?
Yeah, it was an ad, actually.
Yeah, it was really nice.
And it was also in the AAA via book, too.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Half-page ads.
But just new kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it was an ad, that they took out. Yeah, they were impressive.
Yeah.
Well, I am very impressed with the get-it-done attitude.
I'm excited to show you some things that are actually happening.
Super.
Yeah.
Okay, so council member reports. I'm going to just very briefly mention that we did have a meeting, an overflow crowd at the Willits Environmental Hub on Sunday, sponsored by Well, and Emily Rose Smith, who is a master's in economic development, was emceeing and along with me. But there were a lot of community people there and a lot of ideas about how to build businesses, and not only businesses, but that was the main focus, was how to start a business, how to grow a business, what are the resources available and potential financing to help that happen. And there was great exchange. I brought a few of our hot off the press newsletters, if anybody would like one. It has a very short article about that meeting.
This is my report that's coming up.
Oh, okay. So that was my very brief report, and
just give it to everybody. Just go on down the line.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Madge for hosting that. She did a good job, and it was definitely well attended. And I appreciated that you also had our city manager, Bob, come and talk about how the city's participating in helping to grow businesses in our community, because it's important for people to know that we are a part of the solution and working.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of collaboration building between the Visit Willits, the Revite Ed, the Well organization, and just a lot of excitement about making Willits get through this sort of adjustment period with the bypass and come out.
It's going to be more than an adjustment period.
Well, yeah, especially this summer. But anyway, that and really rising to the challenges that we're facing. So anyway, so Larry, you have a report.
Okay, it was interesting. We were going through the garage and throwing out the stuff, and I came across this, and this is the downtown revitalization 30 years ago, and I want you to read that to see how much progress that we've made in 30 years. Not much.
This is an excerpt from that.
Yep.
Okay, so the date is what?
And the date of this was something.
19 something.
Yeah, it's 30 years ago, this year. October 8th, 1997.
Wow.
20 years ago.
21.
Wow. Okay. And so do you have any comment, or we just should read?
No, I just want everybody to read it. Dusty, you ought to read this. It's got some stuff that we're still playing with.
Unfortunate. Okay. Now, if that's it for reports. Enactment of ordinance. We still have a very important item here. So.
Yes, Madam Mayor, as you'll recall, during our last meeting, you introduced a major revision to the sewer ordinance. The sewer ordinance is being revised to do a number of things, incorporate a pretreatment program as is required by the Water Quality Control Board. It also will take some steps to incorporate what we anticipate will be federal requirements. Third, it puts in place the lateral inspection program and makes additional grammatical corrections to text. It was introduced at the last meeting. It's been noticed and published per requirements, and it's now returned for second reading and adoption. The ordinance, if authorized by the council, will become effective 30 days from the second reading date.
And we're not going to actually have a reading, but the motion should be to adopt the ordinance and to waive formal reading.
That's what that's what it says here. Nobody from the public want to speak to this item, and therefore, any comments from the?
I so move.
I'll second with the comment that when we revisit the fees, that we really want to make sure that we're just covering costs, and we get a lot of bad ill will with our business community when we raise fees, and I want to make sure that it's transparent what we're doing.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded with an editorial comment. So the recommended action is to adopt the ordinance as presented by staff and to waive the formal second reading. Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah. So roll call vote. Kathy, please.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Martinstein?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Schwab?
Yes. All right, so that's done. Are there any other good and welfare comments that haven't already been made? And there is no closed session, so I hereby adjourn this meeting at 10:30.